I'm Valerie Sanders, 32, and I never thought my parents' luxury car showroom grand opening would end with me standing alone on the sidewalk, tears streaming down my face. All I wanted was to support my family, despite years of being the overlooked daughter. I never expected Mom to hand me a cleaning rag, or Dad to call security, or my sister Megan to laugh as they declared I was too cheap to belong. If you're watching this video and have ever felt like an outsider in your own family, drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join our community of survivors. Growing up in Detroit was supposed to be my American dream story. Instead, it became a lesson in never being enough. My parents, Robert and Diane Sanders, started a small car dealership when I was just 5 years old. It wasn't much back then, just a modest lot with a handful of used sedans and a tiny office that smelled like my dad's coffee and my mom's perfume. I used to love spinning on the office chair while Dad talked to customers, feeling like I was part of something special. That feeling didn't last long. As the business grew, so did my mother's obsession with appearances. Our modest home was upgraded to a larger one in a better neighborhood. My school clothes became brand-specific. Every decision was filtered through the lens of what will people think. My father, meanwhile, transformed into a workaholic who measured life's value in sales figures and profit margins. Dinner conversations revolved around business strategy rather than, "How was your day?" Then there was my sister Megan. 3 years younger than me, she somehow became the golden child almost from birth. Where I was reserved and creative, Megan was outgoing and practical. She could charm my father's business associates while I stood awkwardly in corners at company events. She understood profit margins at 10 years old while I was sketching designs for my dream bedroom. My 12th birthday crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. I'd been promised a special celebration, just our family at my favorite Italian restaurant. I'd talked about it for weeks, even picked out my outfit. The morning of my birthday, I came downstairs to find my parents huddled around Megan at the kitchen table, cooing over a certificate. She'd won a school mathematics award. By dinner time, my birthday had morphed into a celebration of Megan's achievement. The restaurant reservation was changed to accommodate my father's business partner who wanted to congratulate the math prodigy. My birthday cake had "Congratulations Sanders family" written on it. I blew out candles while everyone toasted to Megan's bright future. As we grew older, the divide between us deepened. I discovered a passion for interior design during high school, transforming my bedroom with salvaged furniture and creative paint techniques on a shoestring budget. My mother called it playing house, while my father dismissed it as arts and crafts. When I announced my intention to study interior design in college, my father's response was immediate: "We're not paying for a useless degree." Meanwhile, Megan was being groomed to follow in our father's footsteps. When she declared her intention to study business administration, our parents beamed with pride. College brochures for prestigious business schools appeared on our kitchen table. My father started introducing her as the future of Sanders Motors at business functions. I applied for every scholarship I could find and won a full ride to the Detroit Institute of Design. While Megan moved into a luxury apartment near her business school, fully funded by our parents, I worked 3 jobs to afford a tiny studio apartment with unreliable heating. During holiday breaks, I'd come home to find my bedroom converted into a proper guest room because Megan needs a home office space when she visits. Those early college years were brutal. I'd work morning shifts at a coffee shop, afternoon shifts at a fabric store, and weekends at a furniture outlet. Between jobs, I'd attend classes and stay up late completing design projects. Meanwhile, my parents continued their running commentary on my life choices. "Such a shame you're wasting your potential," my mother would sigh during our increasingly rare phone calls. "Megan's made the dean's list again," my father would add, as if I hadn't asked about their lives, not my sister's academic achievements. Holiday dinners became exercises in endurance. "Still playing with fabric swatches?" my father would ask, deliberately undermining my coursework. Have you considered a business degree to fall back on? My mother would suggest, as if design was just a phase I needed to outgrow. Megan would sit silently during these exchanges, occasionally offering a sympathetic glance that somehow made everything worse. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving of my senior year. I just secured an internship with a respected design firm, beating out dozens of applicants. When I shared the news, my father glanced up from his phone long enough to say, "That's nice. Maybe someday it'll turn into a real job instead of playing with fabric swatches." Something inside me finally snapped. I placed my napkin on the table, thanked my mother for dinner, and walked out. I spent the night in a motel and drove back to my apartment the next morning. After graduation, I reduced contact to minimal holidays and occasional phone calls. I built a surrogate family of close friends who actually celebrated my successes and supported me through failures. My small design business struggled initially, but each client led to referrals. I specialized in sustainable luxury, transforming spaces with carefully curated pieces that told stories. My tiny apartment in a less desirable neighborhood became my laboratory for design concepts. The emotional toll of family rejection isn't something you can simply shake off. I started therapy, initially just to process the anger I carried. Those sessions revealed patterns of emotional neglect that stretched back to early childhood. I wasn't broken or defective. I was responding normally to abnormal treatment. Understanding this intellectually helped, though the emotional wounds remained tender. When clients asked about my family background, I developed a generic response about growing up in Detroit with parents in the automotive industry. It was easier than explaining that my family had effectively discarded me for not fitting their mold. Friends became my safety net, especially my college roommate Julia, who understood family dysfunction all too well. We spent holidays together creating new traditions that didn't leave us feeling hollow. By my late 20s, I'd established enough of a reputation to be invited to regional design conferences. My business was stable, if not wildly successful. I'd moved to a better apartment and even hired an assistant. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was making it on my own terms. The relationship with my family remained distant but cordial. We'd exchange birthday and Christmas cards, occasionally meet for brief, stilted dinners when I visited Detroit. It wasn't healing, but it was survivable. The Midwest Sustainable Design Conference wasn't exactly where I expected to meet the love of my life. I was presenting a small workshop on eco-friendly materials when I noticed him in the back row, tall with thoughtful eyes, taking actual notes while everyone else was on their phones. Alexander Jensen wore a well-made but not flashy suit and a simple watch that I'd later learn cost more than my car. Nothing about him screamed billionaire real estate developer, which was precisely how he preferred it. After my presentation, he approached with intelligent questions about sustainable sourcing. "I'm developing properties that need to last generations, not just until the next trend," he explained. There was something refreshing about his practical approach to luxury. When he suggested coffee to continue our conversation, I agreed without hesitation. Coffee turned into dinner, and by dessert, I realized we'd been talking for nearly 5 hours. Alexander listened. Really listened. He asked about my design philosophy, my challenges with sourcing materials, my long-term vision. Not once did he check his phone or scan the room for more important people to talk to. When I mentioned my family's dismissal of my career, he seemed genuinely confused. "But what you do adds beauty and function to people's daily lives," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Our early dating period was filled with surprises. Alexander picked me up for our second date in a modest sedan, not the luxury vehicle I might have expected from a successful businessman. His apartment, while in a good neighborhood, was practical rather than ostentatious. "I spend most of my time at construction sites or in meetings," he explained. "This is just where I sleep." Gradually, I learned more about his business. Alexander had built Jensen Global Development from the ground up, specializing in sustainable luxury developments across 3 continents. He employed thousands, had revolutionized green building practices in commercial real estate, and was regularly featured in business magazines. Yet he carried his success lightly, more interested in solving problems than collecting status symbols. The first time I visited his actual home, I nearly turned around at the gate. The sprawling estate was tasteful but undeniably impressive, with carefully manicured grounds and a modern architectural design that blended perfectly with the natural landscape. "I should have warned you," he said, noticing my wide eyes. "This is where I entertain clients and host charity events. The apartment is where I go to feel normal." I'll never forget the moment I discovered his true net worth. We were having breakfast when his assistant called about a minor acquisition issue. Alexander calmly authorized the purchase of a $200 million property while stirring his oatmeal. When he hung up, he continued our conversation about weekend plans as if nothing had happened. Later that night, I Googled him and sat stunned at the Forbes estimate of his wealth. "Does it bother you?" he asked when I brought it up, genuine concern in his eyes. "Not the money," I replied honestly. "Just wondering why someone like you would be interested in someone like me." His answer was immediate: "Because you see beauty where others see empty space. Because you create harmony and balance wherever you go. Because when you talk about your work, your whole face lights up." He took my hand across the table. "Money is just a tool, Valerie. It doesn't define me any more than your family's opinion defines you." Our relationship developed around mutual respect. Alexander encouraged my business growth, sometimes connecting me with clients, but never in a way that felt like charity. We collaborated on a community center project, blending his structural expertise with my interior vision. Weekends were spent exploring art galleries, hiking trails, or simply reading in comfortable silence at his home. He fit seamlessly into my friend group, bringing wine to Julia's dinner parties and engaging my assistant in genuine conversation at office events. After 18 months together, Alexander proposed during a normal Tuesday evening. No grand gestures or public spectacles, just the two of us cooking dinner in his kitchen. "I don't want to spend another day without knowing you'll be my partner in everything," he said, presenting a ring that balanced elegance with my practical nature. "Will you marry me, Valerie?" We planned a small wedding at a historic greenhouse garden. My parents and Megan attended, maintaining appropriate expressions throughout the ceremony. My mother whispered that my dress was surprisingly tasteful, as if she'd expected me to walk down the aisle in burlap. My father shook Alexander's hand with newfound respect after learning exactly what Jensen Global Development entailed. Megan cornered me at the reception to suggest I'd certainly married up, as if Alexander's wealth was the only thing of value I brought to the relationship. Our honeymoon in Japan was a perfect blend of Alexander's business connections and my design inspirations. We visited ancient temples and modern architectural marvels, meeting with craftspeople whose techniques had been passed down for generations. Alexander arranged private tours of spaces normally closed to visitors, his respect for tradition opening doors throughout our journey. Moving into our home together marked another milestone. Despite Alexander's insistence that everything he had was now mine as well, I maintained my design business and contributed to our household expenses. "Your independence is part of who you are," he said when I explained my need to pay my own way. "I would never ask you to give that up." We settled into a rhythm of shared meals, separate workdays, and evenings spent discussing our projects and passions. Throughout those early years of marriage, we established clear boundaries with my family. Alexander understood my complicated feelings toward them, never pushing for reconciliation, but supporting whatever level of contact I felt comfortable maintaining. When we did see them, he was unfailingly polite but protective, steering conversations away from sensitive topics and creating graceful exits when tension mounted. "Family is important," he told me after one particularly strained dinner, "but not at the expense of your well-being." After nearly 5 years of marriage, the text message from my mother caught me completely off guard. "Sanders Motors expanding to luxury market. Grand opening of Rolls-Royce and Bentley showroom next month. Your presence requested." No pleasantries, no personal questions about my life. Just a business announcement with an implied obligation. The follow-up phone call from my father wasn't much warmer. "This is a major milestone for the company," he explained, his voice carrying that familiar tone of restrained excitement he reserved for business victories. "We'll have important clients attending, industry representatives, local celebrities. The whole family should be there to represent the Sanders brand." I sat at my design studio desk, staring at the formal invitation that had arrived by courier. Heavy cream cardstock with embossed gold lettering announced the grand opening of Sanders Luxury Motors with all the subtlety of a peacock display. The RSVP card requested confirmation of attendance and the number of guests. "Do you want to go?" Alexander asked that evening, his expression carefully neutral as he reviewed the invitation. We were having dinner on our terrace, the spring evening unusually warm for Michigan. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe this is an olive branch. Another part remembers every dismissive comment and backhanded compliment. Alexander set down his fork. "I think you need to decide what you want from this relationship going forward. If reconciliation is your goal, this might be a step toward that. If you're comfortable with the current distance, that's valid too." The decision became more complicated when Alexander revealed a scheduling conflict. "I have to be in Singapore that week," he explained, genuine regret in his voice. "The Riverside development is at a critical stage, and the government officials will only meet with me personally." "I could wait until you're back," I suggested, relief and disappointment battling within me. "I can reschedule if you want me there," he offered immediately. "This is important." We talked for hours that night, weighing the potential for genuine family connection against the history of disappointment. "Maybe they've changed," I said, not entirely convinced. "Dad's business has grown substantially. Maybe they're in a different place emotionally too. Just remember that their growth isn't your responsibility," Alexander reminded me gently. "You can open the door without stepping all the way through." I decided to attend alone. The week before the event, anxiety turned my stomach into knots. I spent hours choosing the right outfit, finally settling on a navy blue dress that walked the line between elegant and understated. I would drive my own car, a modest luxury sedan that Alexander had insisted on for safety reasons, but that wouldn't scream wealth. After careful consideration, I decided not to wear my wedding or engagement rings, both valuable pieces that might draw unwanted attention or comments. The day before the event, I scheduled a hair and makeup appointment, needing the confidence boost. My stylist noticed my tension. "Big meeting with difficult clients?" she asked as she curled my hair. "Family event," I replied, meeting her eyes in the mirror. Same difference. That night, I had a full-blown panic attack, sitting on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. while Alexander tried to calm me down via video call from his hotel in Singapore. "You don't have to go," he reminded me. "There's no obligation here." I know, I managed between calming breaths. But I need to do this for me, to show myself that they don't have power over me anymore. The morning of the showroom opening dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully, applied my makeup with precision, and gave myself a final check in the mirror. Professional, polished, but not trying too hard. I called Alexander before leaving the house. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his face tired from late meetings, but his attention fully on me. "Like I'm driving to a job interview I don't actually want," I admitted with a small laugh. "You look beautiful," he said. "And remember, you can leave anytime. Just text me and I'll call with an emergency." The drive to the showroom gave me too much time to think. Memories surfaced of previous family disappointments, my high school graduation where my parents left early for a business dinner, the design award ceremony they promised to attend, but canceled last minute because something came up with Megan. The Christmas I spent alone because my flight was delayed and no one bothered to wait for me before starting the family celebration. 3 times I nearly turned around. At one particularly long red light, I seriously contemplated calling the whole thing off. But something propelled me forward, perhaps the need for closure or the stubborn hope that people can change. The showroom was located in Detroit's most exclusive shopping district, the renovated building gleaming with glass and chrome. The parking lot was filled with luxury vehicles, a red carpet leading to the entrance where professionally dressed staff checked invitations. Taking a deep breath, I turned off the engine and gave myself one final pep talk. You are successful. You are loved. You are enough, I whispered to my reflection in the rearview mirror. And no matter what happens in there, you're driving home to a life you've built on your own terms. The showroom interior was a testament to opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast flattering light over gleaming vehicles arranged like sculptures throughout the space. A string quartet played in one corner, barely audible over the murmur of Detroit's elite exchanging pleasantries and business cards. The air smelled of expensive perfume, leather, and ambition. At the entrance, a young man in a tailored suit stopped me. Invitation, please? His practiced smile didn't quite reach his eyes as he scanned the guest list. Valerie Sanders, I said, presenting the cream cardstock invitation. The owner's daughter. His expression shifted immediately. Oh, Miss Sanders. Your mother mentioned you might be attending. Please, go right in. I spotted my mother across the room, resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was laughing with a group of women whose jewelry could finance a small nation. When she saw me approaching, her smile froze momentarily before reassembling itself into something polite but distant. You made it, she said, air kissing near my cheek to avoid disturbing her makeup. Her eyes performed a quick assessment of my outfit, lingering briefly on my sensible heels. You look appropriate. Let me introduce you to the wives of your father's investors. Not this is my daughter Valerie or my daughter the successful designer. Just you, as if my identity was an afterthought. The introductions were equally impersonal. This is my daughter, she said to the group, not bothering with my name or any details about my life. The next hour passed in a blur of discomfort. My father acknowledged my presence with a brief handshake, his eyes constantly scanning the room for more important guests. Glad you could make it, he said distractedly. The governor might stop by later. Been working on that connection for months. Megan arrived fashionably late, making an entrance in a designer outfit that screamed new money. Her jewelry caught the light with every practiced gesture, diamonds flashing like warning signals. When the family gathered for photos, my mother positioned me at the edge of the frame, a barely included afterthought. Stand over here, Valerie, she directed, physically moving me away from the center. The lighting is better for the main family. The main family? As if I were some distant cousin twice removed. I overheard my mother telling a guest, my younger daughter runs our business operations. The older one works in decorating or something. The dismissive wave of her hand reduced my career to a hobby, my passion to an afterthought. When servers circulated with champagne trays, they somehow never made it to my corner of the room. Eventually, I walked to the bar and got my own glass, earning a disapproving glance from my mother across the room. Megan cornered me by a display of engine components, champagne glass dangling from manicured fingers. You look better than I expected, she said, her tone suggesting minimal effort on my part could achieve miracles. That dress must have been a splurge for you. I sipped my champagne, determined to remain civil. It's nice to see you too, Megan. The showroom looks impressive. Daddy spared no expense, she replied, emphasizing their connection. This is just the beginning. We're expanding to 3 more locations next year. She paused, eyes narrowing slightly. So where's this mysterious husband no one ever sees? Too busy with his development empire. Her air quotes around the words made her skepticism clear. Alexander's in Singapore this week. Government meetings about a new project. She laughed, the sound brittle as thin ice. Right. Government meetings. Is that what he tells you when he's off doing whatever it is he actually does? She leaned closer, perfume clouding around us. You know you can drop the act with me, Val. We both know you've always had an active imagination. Remember your fashion design business in high school that was really just sewing patches on jeans? Before I could respond, she gasped dramatically as her champagne splashed onto my dress. "Oh! How clumsy of me," she exclaimed, making no move to help as the liquid soaked into the navy fabric. "You should probably clean that up before Mom sees. You know how she is about appearances." In the restroom, I dabbed at the stain with damp paper towels, fighting back tears of frustration. The door swung open, revealing one of my mother's friends who barely acknowledged my presence as she reapplied her lipstick. "Such a lovely event your family has put together," she commented vaguely in my direction. "Your sister seems so capable. Following in your father's footsteps, I understand." I nodded politely, not trusting my voice. When she left, I called Alexander, needing to hear a supportive voice. "How's it going?" he asked, concern evident despite the poor connection. "About as expected," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "Megan accidentally spilled champagne on me, Mom's pretending I'm a distant acquaintance, and Dad's too busy networking to notice I exist." "I'm sorry I'm not there," Alexander said. "But I have some news that might help. My meeting's wrapped up early. I've already arranged the flight. I should land in Detroit around 8 p.m. your time." Hope fluttered in my chest. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. I'll come straight to the event if you want me to." I checked my watch. The showroom opening was scheduled until 10 p.m., with a VIP after-party to follow. "Yes, please. If you're not too tired from the flight." "Never too tired for you," he promised. "I'll let you know when I land." Bolstered by the knowledge that Alexander was on his way, I returned to the main showroom. My family had gathered near the central display where a Rolls-Royce Phantom gleamed under carefully positioned spotlights. My father was speaking animatedly to a group of well-dressed men, Megan at his side nodding at appropriate intervals. My mother hovered nearby, adding gracious smiles to the conversation. I approached cautiously, hoping to join the family presentation. As I neared the group, my father's eyes flicked toward me momentarily before he subtly shifted his position, effectively blocking me from the circle. My mother noticed my approach and discreetly shook her head, mouthing, "Not now, this is business." Rebuffed yet again, I found a corner spot where I could observe without being in the way. I texted Alexander, "Counting the minutes until you're here. Being invisible is exhausting." His response was immediate. "You're the most visible person in my world. Boarding now. See you soon." Despite the discomfort, I decided to stay. Alexander was coming, and something inside me wanted him to see firsthand the family dynamic I'd described over the years. Maybe then the lingering doubt, the whisper that perhaps I was exaggerating or too sensitive, would finally be silenced. The evening progressed to its next phase as my father gathered the most important guests for an exclusive tour of the service area and private showroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll follow me, I'd like to show our premier clients the true Sanders luxury motors experience," he announced, gesturing grandly. As the select group assembled, my father placed his arm around Megan's shoulders. "My daughter Megan, the future of Sanders Luxury Motors, will co-host this tour. She's been instrumental in developing our customer experience protocols." I followed at a distance, not explicitly invited but not forbidden either. My father noticed my presence, his eyes narrowing slightly before he returned his attention to his VIP guests. My mother maneuvered herself between me and a particularly influential couple, effectively preventing me from joining their conversation. The private showroom was even more opulent than the main floor, with rare vehicle models displayed on rotating platforms. The lighting shifted colors subtly, highlighting different features of each automobile. A bar had been set up in one corner, staffed by bow-tied bartenders, mixing signature cocktails named after luxury car models. My father positioned himself at the center of the room, Megan still at his side like a carefully groomed accessory. "What you're seeing today is the culmination of a 20-year vision," he began, voice carrying the practiced cadence of a seasoned salesman. Sanders Motors began as a family business, and we remain a family business today. The difference is scale and vision. He gestured around the room, his expression proud. This showroom represents the legacy we're building, a legacy that will continue through generations of Sanders to come. His eyes rested meaningfully on Megan, who beamed under the attention. An older gentleman in an impeccably tailored suit spoke up. "Robert, I believe you have another daughter as well?" He glanced around the room, eventually spotting me at the periphery. "Is she also involved in the business?" My mother intervened before my father could respond. "Oh, she's just visiting," she said smoothly, as if I were a distant relative passing through town rather than her firstborn child. I stepped forward, determined to introduce myself properly, but Megan intercepted smoothly. "Dad, shouldn't we show everyone the custom ordering suite? I think Mr. Harrington would be particularly interested in the leather options for the Bentley Continental." The moment passed, my presence once again rendered irrelevant. The tour continued through various sections of the facility, each more exclusive than the last. I maintained my position at the edge of the group, increasingly aware of my precarious status as neither guest nor host. During a champagne toast celebrating the partnership with Rolls-Royce, my mother suddenly appeared at my side, her smile fixed, but her eyes cold. She pressed something into my hand, and I looked down to find a microfiber cleaning cloth. "Make yourself useful," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ambient music. "Some of the display vehicles need polishing. Fingerprints on the black paint." I stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to clean cars? At your grand opening? You're just standing around anyway," she hissed. "At least this way you'd be contributing something." Her eyes flicked over my dress. "Besides, you've already got a stain. It's not like you can make that outfit any worse." I felt heat rising to my face. "I'm not your staff, Mom. I'm your daughter. I came to support you and Dad, not to be the help. You're embarrassing us by hovering like staff, but not actually doing anything," she snapped, voice rising slightly. "Either make yourself presentable and sociable with the right people, or make yourself useful behind the scenes. Those are your options." My father noticed our exchange and strode over, professional smile dropping as he approached. "What's the problem now?" he demanded, keeping his voice low but intense. "Nothing, Robert," my mother replied. "Just suggesting Valerie might be more comfortable helping the detail team, since she's not really mingling." "I didn't come here to be your janitor," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I came because you invited me. As family." Megan approached, sighing theatrically for the benefit of nearby guests. "Is she making a scene again?" she asked no one in particular, rolling her eyes. "Some things never change." My father's jaw tightened. "Valerie, we're in the middle of the most important business event of our careers. Whatever issue you're having right now needs to wait." "The issue I'm having," I said, no longer bothering to whisper, "is being treated like an unwelcome stranger by my own family." "You're the one who chose to distance yourself," my father countered. "You've never supported this business or shown any interest in our success. And now you show up, underdressed, unconnected, trying to, what? Ruin our big night out of spite." "I came because you invited me," I repeated, the cleaning cloth still clutched in my hand. "Because despite everything, you're still my family." Megan scoffed loudly. "She's clearly too cheap to belong in a place like this. Look at her. No jewelry, boring shoes, department store dress." She turned to our mother. "I told you inviting her was a mistake. She doesn't fit our brand image." "She's always been the odd one out," my mother agreed, as if I weren't standing right there. "But family obligations, you know how it is." She directed this comment to a nearby guest who was pretending not to listen. My father's patience visibly snapped. "If you can't support this family properly, you should leave," he said flatly. With a subtle nod, he summoned a security guard who had been stationed near the entrance. "Please escort my daughter out. She's not feeling well." The security guard, a young man who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation, approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, if you'll come with me, please." In that moment, surrounded by luxury and wealth, I had never felt more worthless. The security guard kept a respectful distance as he guided me toward the exit, his discomfort evident in his averted eyes. "I'm sorry about this, ma'am," he murmured. "Just doing my job." "I understand," I replied, maintaining as much dignity as possible while being escorted out of my own family's event. "Can I get my purse first? It's on the side table near the main display." Before he could respond, Megan appeared with exaggerated concern on her face. "I'll take care of her things," she assured the guard. "Best if this is handled quickly and quietly." The message was clear: get me out fast, minimize the disruption. Guests pretended not to stare as I was led toward the door, their conversations growing hushed, then resuming with increased animation once I passed. My father's voice carried across the showroom: "Family problems, nothing to worry about." Now, about those import tariffs on luxury vehicles. I stumbled slightly as I exited the building, emotion finally overwhelming my composure. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks as I stood alone on the sidewalk, the evening air cool against my flushed skin. Without my purse, I couldn't even leave. My car keys, phone, and wallet were all inside. Fortunately, I'd slipped my phone into my dress pocket after texting Alexander earlier. With trembling fingers, I called him. "I'm at the airport," he answered immediately. "Just landed." "What's happening?" "They kicked me out." I managed between quiet sobs. "Security escorted me out. My own father had me removed like some disruptive stranger." "What?" The shock in his voice mirrored my own disbelief. "Where are you now?" "Outside the showroom." "They wouldn't let me get my purse." "My keys are inside." His response was immediate and calm. "I'm getting in the car now. Don't go anywhere. I'll be there in 20 minutes, traffic permitting." "Okay," I whispered, suddenly exhausted by the evening's emotional toll. "Valerie," Alexander's voice softened. "I love you. And I'm so sorry this happened. Stay strong for just a little longer." After hanging up, I moved to a decorative bench near the entrance, trying to compose myself. I wiped away tears, straightened my dress, and took deep breaths until my breathing steadied. An odd calm settled over me, perhaps the peaceful clarity that comes after a storm. My family had shown me exactly who they were and how they valued me. The pretense was finally over. 15 minutes later, I heard it before I saw it, the distinctive purr of a powerful engine, smoother than standard luxury vehicles. A gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom turned into the driveway, its polished surface reflecting the showroom lights like a moving mirror. The very same model that had been on center display inside was now rolling toward the entrance. Inside the showroom, I could see guests turning toward the windows, conversation pausing as attention shifted to the new arrival. The Rolls-Royce came to a perfect stop directly in front of the entrance, its presence commanding immediate respect. A uniformed driver emerged and walked around to open the passenger door. Alexander stepped out, immaculate in a bespoke suit despite having just completed a 17-hour flight. His eyes scanned the entrance until he spotted me, and his expression softened immediately. He walked directly to me, ignoring the stares from inside the showroom, and took my hands in his. "Are you okay?" he asked, searching my face with genuine concern. "I am now," I said, meaning it completely. He pulled me into a gentle embrace, mindful of my stained dress, and whispered, "I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." "You're here now," I replied, drawing strength from his presence. "That's what matters." After a moment, Alexander stepped back and looked toward the showroom entrance. "I think we should retrieve your purse, don't you?" I nodded, straightening my shoulders. "Yes, let's do that." We walked arm in arm back into the showroom, his presence beside me like armor. A hush fell over the nearest guests as we entered, rippling outward until the entire space grew quiet except for the background music. My father stood frozen near the central display, champagne glass halted midway to his lips. My mother's practiced smile faltered as she registered Alexander's presence, her eyes darting between us in confusion. Megan's expression shifted from shock to calculation in the space of a heartbeat. My father recovered first, setting down his glass and striding forward with an outstretched hand. "Welcome. You must be." His voice faltered as recognition dawned. "Alexander Jensen?" "Yes," Alexander replied coolly. "CEO of Jensen Global Development. And Valerie's husband." My mother materialized at my father's side, her smile now dazzling. "Mr. Jensen. What a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you tonight. Welcome to Sanders Luxury Motors." "I understand my wife was asked to leave," Alexander said, his tone pleasant but firm. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding." "A terrible misunderstanding," my mother agreed quickly. "Family communication, you know how it can be. Please, join our VIP group. We were just discussing expansion opportunities." Alexander's hand remained firmly at the small of my back. "Actually, we're just here for Valerie's purse. She mentioned it was left inside." Megan stepped forward, suddenly eager to be helpful. "I have it right here. I was keeping it safe." She presented my handbag with a flourish, her eyes never leaving Alexander's face. "So nice to finally meet my brother-in-law. Valerie tells us so little about your work. We should really get together sometime to discuss potential business synergies." Alexander accepted the purse with a polite nod. "Thank you." He handed it to me before turning back to my family. "Your showroom is impressive. We've actually been looking at expanding our company fleet. Currently, we maintain about 30 luxury vehicles for executive transport." My father's eyes widened. 30? Well, we would certainly be interested in discussing fleet options. I could set up a meeting for next week. "That won't be necessary," Alexander replied smoothly. "We already have appointments with several other dealerships tomorrow. But thank you for the offer." I checked my purse, confirming all contents were present. "I think we have everything we need," I said, looking up at Alexander. My mother made one last attempt. "This has all been a misunderstanding, darling. Why don't you and Alexander stay? The night is young, and we have so much to catch up on." "I think we're done here," I replied, my voice calm and clear in the hushed showroom. As we turned to leave, my father pressed his business card into Alexander's hand. "If you reconsider about the fleet vehicles, my direct line is on there." Alexander pocketed the card with a noncommittal smile, his other hand never leaving the small of my back as we walked toward the exit. Megan hurried after us. "Let me give you my card too. I handle our corporate accounts personally." She fumbled in her clutch, producing a glossy business card embossed with the Sanders Luxury Motors logo. "Thank you," Alexander said politely, accepting the card without slowing our exit. My mother called after us. We should have dinner soon. "Call me Valerie." We walked out with dignity, neither rushing nor lingering, the perfect picture of composure. The uniformed driver opened the doors of the Rolls-Royce, and we slipped into the sumptuous leather interior. Only when the privacy screen raised and the vehicle pulled away did I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. The moment the privacy screen was fully raised and we were safely moving away from the showroom, I collapsed against Alexander's shoulder, emotions finally breaking through my composed exterior. He held me tightly as sobs racked my body, years of accumulated hurt pouring out in a torrent. "I'm sorry," I gasped between tears. "Your suit." "Don't apologize," he murmured, stroking my hair. "Not for this. Not ever for this." When I finally calmed enough to speak coherently, I saw the anger simmering beneath Alexander's carefully controlled expression. "I should have been there," he said, voice tight. "The way they treated you." "You saw enough," I replied, wiping my eyes with the handkerchief he offered. "Now you understand what I've been trying to explain all these years." "I believed you before," he assured me, "but seeing it firsthand." He shook his head, jaw clenched. "No one deserves that treatment, especially not from family." I looked out the window at the passing city lights, feeling strangely hollow and full simultaneously. The worst part is that even knowing how they are, part of me still hoped for something different. How pathetic is that? Alexander turned my face gently toward his. Hope isn't pathetic, Valerie. It's human. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of how you handled yourself in there. Many people would have screamed or made a scene. You were dignified and strong. I don't feel strong, I admitted. That's the thing about strength, he said quietly. It's most evident when we feel weakest. Instead of returning home immediately, Alexander directed the driver to our favorite restaurant, a small French bistro tucked away from the main dining districts. The owner, Marcel, welcomed us personally despite the late hour, settling us in a private corner booth. I know you probably don't feel like celebrating, Alexander said as Marcel brought champagne without being asked. But I refuse to let your family ruin our evening completely. Over a quiet meal, we discussed what had happened, processing the events together. They're never going to change, I realized aloud, the truth finally settling in my heart. All these years, I've been waiting for some recognition, some sign that they see me. But they don't want to see me. They want to see the version of me that fits their narrative. And that's their loss, Alexander said firmly. The real you is extraordinary. The weeks following the showroom incident brought a barrage of communication from my family. My father left voicemails about exciting business opportunities and misunderstandings that shouldn't interfere with potential partnerships. My mother sent text messages about family unity and moving past disagreements. Megan suddenly developed an interest in catching up, sister to sister, her messages transparently focused on establishing connection with Alexander. I ignored them all, focusing instead on self-care and emotional processing. I immersed myself in design projects, finding solace in creating beautiful, functional spaces for clients who genuinely appreciated my work. Alexander, true to his nature, neither pushed me toward reconciliation nor encouraged complete estrangement. This is your journey, he said. I'm just here to support whatever you decide. 3 weeks after the incident, we retreated to our lake house for a long weekend, needing space from daily pressures. Sitting on the dock at sunset, feet dangling in cool water, I finally felt clarity emerging from the emotional fog. I think I need to meet with them, I said, watching ripples spread across the lake's surface. Not for reconciliation, but for closure. To say the things I've never said. Alexander nodded, understanding without words. When you're ready, I'll be there. No, I replied after consideration. I appreciate that, but I need to do this myself. You being there would change the dynamic. They'd focus on impressing you rather than hearing me. He squeezed my hand. Whatever you need. Just remember you're not obligated to maintain relationships that harm you, even with family. The following week, I scheduled a meeting at a neutral restaurant, halfway between our home and my parents' house. They arrived together, Megan included, looking uncomfortable outside their natural habitat of luxury and control. Thank you for meeting us, my mother began, her social smile firmly in place. We've been so worried. Have you? I asked quietly. Because your messages have been exclusively about business opportunities and social appearances. Not once has anyone asked if I'm okay after being publicly humiliated and escorted out by security. My father shifted uncomfortably. That was unfortunate. The situation escalated quickly. The situation, I repeated. You mean when you chose to treat your daughter like an unwelcome intruder rather than family? You've always been so sensitive, my mother said dismissively. We were under tremendous pressure that night. Surely you understand the importance of appearances in business settings. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I understand appearances have always mattered more to you than my feelings. I understand that Megan has always been the daughter you wanted, and I've been the disappointment you tolerate when convenient. That's not fair, my father protested weakly. Isn't it? I challenged. When have you ever attended my design showcases? When have you ever asked about my business with genuine interest? When have you ever introduced me with the same pride you show when introducing Megan? Silence fell over the table, heavy with unspoken truths. I didn't come here to rehash old hurts, I continued after a moment. I came to establish boundaries going forward. I don't want to cut you out of my life completely, but I won't accept the treatment I've endured all these years. What are you saying? My mother asked cautiously. I'm saying that if you want a relationship with me, it needs to be based on mutual respect. No more dismissive comments about my career. No more treating me like an afterthought. No more using me or my husband as business connections. My father looked genuinely bewildered. We've always supported you, Valerie. We paid for your education, gave you every advantage. You paid for Megan's education, I corrected. I worked 3 jobs and earned scholarships, and material support isn't the same as emotional support. Megan, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Not everyone gets the same things in life, Val. Some of us are just better suited to certain paths. That's reality. I turned to her, seeing clearly for the first time the insecurity beneath her bravado. The issue isn't that we took different paths, Megan. It's that my path was deemed less valuable simply because it wasn't what they wanted for me. A flicker of understanding crossed her face. I guess I've never really thought about it from your perspective. That's part of the problem, I said gently. None of you have. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, circling through defensiveness, tentative acknowledgments, and cautious steps toward understanding. My parents struggled to accept their role in our fractured relationship, defaulting to justifications based on business necessities and family expectations. Megan, surprisingly, showed glimmers of genuine reflection, admitting to moments of jealousy that had fueled her competitive behavior. By the time we parted, no magical healing had occurred, but something had shifted. I'd spoken my truth without anger or accusation, simply stating the reality of my experience. For perhaps the first time, they'd been forced to listen. We would like to try, my mother said as we prepared to leave. To do better, I mean. That's all I've ever wanted, I replied honestly. In the months that followed, our relationship entered a new phase. Contact remained limited but civil. Holiday gatherings became possible, though still sometimes strained. My parents made awkward but genuine attempts to show interest in my design work, occasionally referring potential clients my way. Megan and I established a cautious friendship based on adult respect rather than childhood competition. The most profound changes, however, happened within me. Speaking my truth had broken something loose, releasing me from the desperate need for parental approval that had shadowed my life. I rediscovered joy in my work, approaching projects with renewed creativity and confidence. Alexander noticed the difference immediately, commenting that I seemed lighter, more fully yourself. Our weekend trip to the lake house became a regular retreat, a place to decompress and reconnect. During one such weekend, sitting wrapped in blankets around a bonfire, Alexander asked what I considered the most valuable lesson from the whole experience. I've learned that you can't earn approval from people who aren't equipped to give it, I said after reflection. My parents' limitations aren't a reflection of my worth. And success doesn't require everyone's acknowledgement to be real. That's profound, he said, stoking the fire. And difficult to truly understand. I've also learned that family isn't just who you're born to, I continued. It's who makes space for you to be authentically yourself. Sometimes those are the same people. Sometimes they're not. The healing process wasn't linear or complete. Certain comments still stung, old patterns occasionally reemerged. But I'd found freedom in accepting my family's limitations while refusing to be limited by them. I maintained civil contact while investing my emotional energy in relationships that nourished rather than depleted me. My design business flourished as I launched a firm specializing in sustainable luxury, blending my creative vision with Alexander's business acumen. I built connections with artisans and craftspeople who shared my values, creating spaces that reflected authentic expression rather than status-seeking display. Throughout this journey, I came to understand that true wealth isn't measured in luxury cars or elite connections. It's found in relationships that allow growth, in work that brings fulfillment, in the courage to stand firmly in your own truth even when others can't see it. The road to healing with my family remains long and uncertain. Some wounds may never fully close, but I've learned to walk that road on my own terms, neither abandoning hope nor surrendering my self-worth in its pursuit. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, know that your value isn't determined by their ability to see it. Sometimes the most powerful act of self-care is accepting that others' limitations are not your responsibility to fix. Have you experienced similar family dynamics? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. Remember, sometimes the family we create in life becomes more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to stand in your truth, whatever that may be.
I'm Olivia Peterson, 28 years old, once the proud daughter in what seemed like a picture-perfect family in suburban Chicago. I always thought sacrificing for family was what love meant, until my sister Kayla's words shattered everything I believed. "Why don't you just disappear?" she screamed, blaming me for ruining her life. The worst part wasn't her cruel words, but watching my parents stand silently beside her, nodding in agreement. I didn't argue or plead my case. I simply walked out with one suitcase and started over. This morning, almost a year later, I woke up to 14 missed calls from them. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if my story resonates with you, please subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Growing up in Oakwood Heights, an upper-middle-class suburb outside Chicago, my childhood seemed blessed with comfort and stability. My father, John, worked as a senior accountant at a respectable firm, while my mother, Diane, taught third grade at the local elementary school, the same one my sister and I attended. Our family of 4 lived in a 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn that Dad meticulously maintained every weekend. Kayla, 3 years younger than me at 25 now, always received slightly more attention from our parents. The extra birthday presents, the special exceptions to household rules, the quick forgiveness after tantrums. I noticed these things, but dismissed them as normal family dynamics. After all, we still had beautiful moments together. Sunday dinners were sacred in our household, with Mom preparing elaborate meals and Dad telling stories that made us laugh until our sides hurt. Every summer, we'd rent the same lake house in Michigan for 2 weeks, where we'd swim until sunset and roast marshmallows under starry skies. During holidays, our home transformed into a winter wonderland, with decorations covering every surface, and the scent of cinnamon and pine lingering in the air. I excelled academically throughout school, eventually earning a full scholarship to Northwestern University for business marketing, while Kayla struggled to maintain B's and showed little interest in academics beyond socializing. I still remember my graduation day, how proud my parents seemed, though they spent most of the celebration reassuring Kayla that college isn't for everyone and that she'd find her path soon. After college, I secured a position at TechVision, a growing technology company in downtown Chicago, and quickly rose through the ranks to become a senior marketing executive by 26. My salary allowed me to rent a spacious 2-bedroom apartment in a trendy neighborhood, where I often hosted family gatherings to maintain our traditions. The first significant shift in our dynamic came when Dad's company downsized 3 years ago, and he was forced to take a lower-paying position. Without hesitation, I offered financial assistance, covering their property taxes and helping with Kayla's car payments. Meanwhile, Kayla bounced between retail jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months, always quitting because of toxic workplace environments or unappreciative managers. She also struggled with relationships, cycling through boyfriends, who were never good enough, according to our parents. The one stable relationship she had with Tyler, a perfectly nice pharmacy technician, ended when she decided he was limiting her potential. During my promotion celebration dinner, I noticed the first overt signs of Kayla's jealousy. As I shared my excitement about leading a major product launch, Kayla abruptly excused herself from the table, returning with reddened eyes. Mom immediately went to comfort her, while Dad changed the subject to avoid further upset. "Not everyone needs to climb the corporate ladder to be successful," Mom said pointedly, while reaching for Kayla's hand. I nodded in agreement, swallowing. My hurt as my accomplishment was diminished to spare my sister's feelings. My boyfriend Mark, whom I'd been dating for nearly 2 years, noticed these dynamics immediately. "Your family always seems to prioritize Kayla's feelings over yours," he observed after one particularly uncomfortable Sunday dinner. I defended them fiercely, explaining that Kayla just needed extra support, and that family supports each other through thick and thin. Mark would sigh and drop the subject, but his concerns lingered between us like an unwelcome guest. Looking back, I can see how I had established a pattern of accommodating my family's needs above my own. I'd rearrange work commitments for last-minute family events, loan money that was never repaid, and silence my own achievements to avoid triggering Kayla's insecurities. I believed this was what loving your family meant. It would take a devastating confrontation for me to realize how wrong I was. Everything changed when Tyler finally ended his relationship with Kayla after she cheated on him with a bartender she met during a girls' night out. Rather than taking responsibility, Kayla descended into a spiral of self-pity, and my parents immediately mobilized to support her. "Your sister needs you right now," Mom insisted during a tearful phone call. "She can't be alone in that cramped apartment of hers. You have a spare bedroom, don't you?" Before I could fully process the request, Kayla was at my doorstep with 3 oversized suitcases and her emotional support cat, Apollo, despite my building's no-pet policy. "It's just for a month," she promised, mascara streaking down her face. "I just need to get back on my feet." I cleared out my home office that doubled as a guest room, moving my work setup into a corner of my bedroom to accommodate her. Mark, who often stayed over 4 nights a week, was understanding at first. "Family comes first," he said, though I could sense his reservation. Within days, our routine was completely disrupted. Kayla would sleep until noon, leaving dirty dishes in the sink and wet towels on the bathroom floor. My mornings became a silent cleanup mission before logging into early meetings. I rearranged my work schedule to accompany Kayla to therapy appointments she'd inevitably cancel last minute, and cooked comfort foods she'd barely touch before ordering expensive takeout. Meanwhile, my parents called daily to check on Kayla, rarely asking how I was managing. During a family dinner at my apartment, where I'd spent hours preparing Kayla's favorite meal, my mother raised a toast to Kayla for being brave enough to find herself during this difficult time. My own news about securing a major client that week went unmentioned. When I brought it up later, Dad nodded absently while scrolling through his phone. "That's nice." "Honey," he said without looking up. 1 month stretched into 2, then 3. Mark's overnight visits dwindled as Kayla developed a habit of barging into my bedroom without knocking or accidentally walking around the apartment in just a towel when he was over. When I gently suggested she look for her own place, she burst into tears. "Do you want me to be homeless? Is your boyfriend more important than your only sister?" My parents backed her completely. "Relationships come and go," Mom said dismissively, "but family is forever." The tension between Mark and me grew as our privacy evaporated. "I feel like we're in a relationship with your sister too," he said during one of our now rare date nights, which had been interrupted by 17 text messages from Kayla asking when I'd be home. Financial strain added to my stress as Kayla borrowed money for therapy sessions, new clothes to boost her confidence, and nights out with friends to network for job opportunities. None of this money was ever repaid, and any mention of it was met with accusations of me being materialistic and unsupportive. After a particularly tense week where Kayla had maxed out my Netflix account with unauthorized purchases and used my expensive skincare products without asking, Mark finally reached his breaking point. "I can't do this anymore, Olivia," he said, during a coffee date that Kayla had tried to invite herself to. "You're letting your family walk all over you, and you're dragging me down with you. I love you, but I can't be with someone who doesn't value themselves enough to set basic boundaries." I begged him to reconsider, promised things would change, but his mind was made up. That night, I cried silently in my bedroom while Kayla hosted 2 friends in my living room, loudly laughing and drinking the expensive wine Mark had given me for our anniversary. When I emerged with puffy eyes the next morning, Mom called to check on Kayla and seemed irritated when I mentioned my breakup. "Well, there are plenty of fish in the sea," she said dismissively. "Besides, Kayla's going through a much worse breakup. Tyler was her soulmate." My father, during his weekly visit, awkwardly patted my shoulder and said, You're always so strong, Olivia. Not like your sister. She feels things deeply. That night, alone in my bathroom, I experienced my first panic attack, gasping for breath, as a terrible realization washed over me. Nobody in my family considered my feelings worth protecting. I was expected to be the supporter, never the supported. The safety net, never the one falling. It was my first taste of disappointment in those I loved most, but far from the last. The situation escalated beyond my imagination when Kayla announced her newest career aspiration: marketing. "I've always had a creative eye," she declared over breakfast one Tuesday, though she'd never shown any interest in my field before. "I think I'd be really good at what you do." 3 days later, she applied for an entry-level position at TechVision without consulting me. My boss, Rebecca, called me into her office with a concerned expression. "Your sister submitted an application, citing you as her professional reference. Is this something you're comfortable with?" Trapped between professional integrity and family pressure, I reluctantly vouched for Kayla, downplaying my reservations and emphasizing her creative potential. Against my better judgment, I used connections I'd spent years cultivating to help Kayla secure an interview, then coached her through the process. When she was hired for the social media team, my parents reacted as though she'd been named CEO. "Marketing must run in the family genes," Dad boasted, completely dismissing my years of education and hard work. "Kayla's natural talents are just shining through." The professional nightmare began immediately. Kayla arrived late to meetings, submitted incomplete work, and spent work hours shopping online or texting friends. Worse, she leveraged our relationship to bypass normal channels, coming directly to me when she missed deadlines or received critical feedback. "Can't you just fix it?" became her standard response to any work challenge. My reputation, built on years of professionalism and results, began to suffer by association. Senior colleagues stopped including me in strategic discussions, and I overheard whispers about nepotism in the break room. Rebecca pulled me aside after Kayla missed an important client presentation. "I understand family loyalty, Olivia, but this reflects poorly on the entire department. More importantly, it reflects poorly on you." Before I could address the workplace situation, a family emergency erupted. Dad collapsed during a weekend golf game and was rushed to the hospital with cardiac symptoms. Though it turned out to be severe anxiety rather than a heart attack, the scare prompted me to take family medical leave to care for him. For 3 weeks, I shuttled between hospitals, insurance offices, and my parents' home, managing medications, preparing meals, and handling household tasks. Kayla visited the hospital exactly twice, both times for less than 30 minutes, yet received effusive praise from relatives for being there during the crisis. Meanwhile, I navigated complex insurance claims, arranged for cardiac specialists, and researched rehabilitation options, all while trying to manage critical work projects remotely. My absence from the office coincided with evaluations for a director-level promotion I'd been working toward for 18 months. Despite submitting all required documentation and arranging video interviews, I received the disappointing news via email. "While your contributions are valued, consistent physical presence is a requirement for leadership positions." The promotion went to a colleague with less experience but stronger recent engagement. When I shared this setback with my family, seeking some acknowledgement of my sacrifice, Mom said, "At least you still have a job." Poor Kayla is struggling with the pressure of maintaining her position while worried sick about her father. Dad nodded in agreement, adding, "You've always landed on your feet, Olivia. You'll get the next one." Their dismissal stung, but the financial impact hurt worse. My savings, already depleted from supporting Kayla, dwindled further as I covered increasing medical expenses and home healthcare costs that insurance wouldn't fully reimburse. Meanwhile, Kayla purchased a designer handbag that cost more than 2 of her paychecks, explaining it was an investment piece for professional advancement. My parents' financial dependence on me increased as Dad's medical bills accumulated, and his return to work was delayed. They began calling weekly with temporary requests, help with the mortgage, unexpected car repairs, property tax installments. I canceled my gym membership, switched to store-brand groceries, and postponed necessary dental work to cover these expenses, while Kayla posted Instagram photos from weekend getaways and upscale restaurants, sometimes with our parents in tow. At my therapist's suggestion, I attempted to establish financial boundaries during a family dinner. "I'm happy to help, but I need to create a budget for family assistance," I began carefully. Before I could continue, Kayla interrupted with news about a minor workplace achievement, completely derailing the conversation. Later, when I tried to revisit the topic privately with my father, he looked wounded. "After all we've done for you, putting you through college and supporting your career, we never thought you'd keep score." I retreated, ashamed for having brought it up at all. As autumn approached, another troubling pattern emerged. Kayla's occasional wine with dinner had evolved into nightly drinking, often starting before she arrived home from work. Empty bottles accumulated in my recycling bin, and her mood swings became more pronounced. When I gently suggested she might be using alcohol to cope with stress, she exploded. "Not everyone is perfect like you. Some of us need to unwind after dealing with demanding bosses all day." My parents, when I confided my concerns, immediately defended her. "She's just going through a phase," Mom insisted. "Besides, your father and I enjoy our cocktail hour, and nobody calls us alcoholics." The mountain of unaddressed issues grew higher. Kayla's increasingly problematic drinking, her professional misconduct reflecting on my reputation, my parents, financial demands, my dwindling savings, and my stalled career. Each time I attempted to address any of these concerns, I was positioned as selfish, unfeeling, or unnecessarily worried. My therapist used terms like family scapegoat and enablement patterns, but I struggled to apply these concepts to the people I loved. Instead, I doubled down on being the responsible one, the fixer, the provider, convinced that eventually, my sacrifices would be acknowledged and the family balance restored. I couldn't have been more wrong. The breaking point arrived during what should have been a joyous occasion, a dinner celebrating Dad's full recovery 3 months after his health scare. I'd spent the entire day preparing his favorite meals, decorating my parents' house with balloons and welcome back to health banners, and even baking from scratch despite my limited culinary skills. Everyone seemed in good spirits as we gathered around the dining table laden with comfort foods and Dad's favorite bourbon for a special toast. Midway through dinner, just as I was serving the main course, Kayla cleared her throat dramatically. "I have something important to share," she announced, her voice quivering slightly. My mother immediately reached for her hand, concern etched across her face. "What is it, sweetheart?" Kayla took a theatrical sip of wine, her third glass of the evening. "I lost my job today. They fired me." The table fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Dad put down his fork. "What happened, Princess?" Kayla's gaze locked onto me, her eyes narrowing. "Ask Olivia. She's the reason they let me go." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "What? I had nothing to do with it. I was in meetings all day." Kayla's voice rose, wobbling between anger and performed victimhood. "Don't play innocent. You've been undermining me since day one because you couldn't stand having me at your precious company. You were afraid I'd outshine you." My parents' expressions shifted from confusion to suspicion as they looked at me. I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. "That's ridiculous. You've been on probation for attendance issues and incomplete projects. The decision came from team management, not me." Kayla stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Why don't you just disappear?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "You've always wanted to be the only successful one. You've spent years making me look bad, stealing every opportunity, making sure I can never catch up." Her voice rose to a fever pitch as she continued her barrage. "You ruined my relationship with Tyler by telling him I wasn't good enough for him. You got me this job just so you could control me and then destroy my career. You've systematically ruined my entire life while pretending to be Little Miss Perfect." Wine sloshed from her glass onto the tablecloth Mom had inherited from Grandma. I looked desperately toward my parents, waiting for them to intervene, to recognize the absurdity of these accusations. Instead, I watched in horror as Mom nodded. Slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval directed at me. Dad sighed heavily, looking at me with disappointment. "Olivia," Mom finally said, her voice cold, "maybe it would be better if you gave us some space right now. Your sister is clearly devastated, and your presence isn't helping. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes as he added, Your sister needs our support right now, not criticism. Can't you see how much she's hurting? In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The dining room I decorated with such care just hours earlier suddenly felt foreign, hostile. Years of similar moments flashed through my mind with perfect clarity. Achievements diminished, accusations accepted without question, sacrifices taken for granted, all while Kayla received endless patience and benefit of the doubt. The weight of this realization nearly crushed me. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn the unconditional love my sister received freely. I'd built my identity around being the responsible one, the successful one, the one who took care of everyone else. And in return, I'd been cast as the villain in my own family's narrative. I understand, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. I think you're right. We all need some space. I carefully folded my napkin and placed it beside my barely touched plate. Kayla watched with a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, victory gleaming in her eyes. My mother busied herself comforting Kayla, while my father suddenly found his water glass fascinating. Neither looked at me as I stood, gathered my purse and car keys, and walked toward the front door. No one called after me or asked me to stay. No one suggested we talk things through when emotions weren't running so high. The silence was deafening, confirming everything I needed to know. With a final glance at the family photos lining the entryway, generations of smiling faces witnessing my departure, I closed the door quietly behind me. 28 years of trying to be enough ended not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a soft click of a latch. I got into my car, hands trembling slightly as I turned the key in the ignition. Rain had started to fall, matching the tears I refused to shed in their presence. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd broken my heart. Instead, I drove away from the only family I'd ever known, understanding for the first time that I deserved better than to be someone else's scapegoat. The rain intensified as I drove aimlessly through familiar neighborhoods that suddenly felt foreign. Streetlights blurred through my windshield, partly from the downpour and partly from tears I could no longer contain. Eventually, I pulled into a hotel parking lot, a mid-range chain where I'd once stayed for a business conference. The night clerk barely glanced at my puffy eyes as he processed my credit card, offering a practiced smile and directions to a room on the third floor. Once inside the anonymous beige room, the gravity of what had just happened hit me fully. I collapsed onto the stiff mattress and finally allowed myself to break down completely. Years of suppressed hurt erupted in gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the little girl who had always tried to be perfect, for the young woman who believed family meant unconditional support, and for my present self, suddenly adrift without the anchors of identity I'd relied on, however painful they had been. When morning light filtered through thin curtains, I sat cross-legged on the unmade bed, eyes swollen but mind strangely clear. A decision crystallized with surprising certainty. I wouldn't return to a dynamic that had been slowly destroying me. I deserved more than being convenient when needed and villainized when not. After a scalding shower that couldn't quite wash away the heaviness in my chest, I made a list of immediate practical needs. Housing topped the list, followed by retrieving essential belongings from my apartment, where Kayla still resided. My financial situation, while strained from months of supporting family members, wasn't dire enough to prevent a fresh start. 3 hours and numerous phone calls later, I secured a 6-month lease on a studio apartment in downtown Chicago, significantly smaller than my previous place but blissfully mine alone. The property manager, impressed by my credit score and employment verification, agreed to expedited move-in the following day. Next came the uncomfortable task of retrieving my belongings. I strategically timed my visit for when Kayla would be at a job interview she'd mentioned last week. The apartment felt different somehow, smaller and cluttered with evidence of my sister's careless habitation. I moved efficiently, packing only essentials: clothing, personal documents, irreplaceable, photographs, and a few sentimental items. I left behind furniture, kitchen equipment, and the television, limiting myself to what would fit in my car and a small storage unit I'd rented. As I packed the framed photo of my college graduation, I noticed a stack of unopened mail on the counter, including several envelopes marked Final Notice, addressed to Kayla. Another problem I was leaving behind. Before departing, I left my keys and a brief note explaining I wouldn't be returning and that she had 60 days to find new housing arrangements per our lease agreement. I transferred the final 2 months' rent into the landlord's account, ensuring Kayla wouldn't face immediate eviction while severing my last financial responsibility toward her. The most surprising aspect of those first days was the complete silence from my family. No calls questioning my whereabouts, no texts demanding explanations, no emails expressing concern. Their absence confirmed my invisibility unless I was actively providing something they needed. My new apartment, despite its compact size and sparse furnishings, became a sanctuary. The first night I stood in the tiny kitchenette, realizing I had no idea what I actually enjoyed eating when not catering to others' preferences. My first solo grocery trip became an unexpected journey of self-discovery. I lingered in aisles, considering options based solely on my own taste. I selected ingredients for meals I'd always wanted to try, but had avoided because Kayla disliked spicy food, Dad was skeptical of foreign cuisines, and Mom insisted on traditional American dinners. That small act of selecting food I wanted represented the first step toward reclaiming myself. The following weeks brought practical challenges that distracted from emotional wounds. Learning to cook properly for one person proved surprisingly difficult after years of preparing family-sized portions. Weekends stretched emptily without family obligations filling every available hour. Colleagues noticed my subdued demeanor, but I deflected questions with vague references to family matters being resolved. Only my therapist received the full, unfiltered account of what had transpired, providing crucial validation that my decision to establish boundaries was not only reasonable but necessary for my well-being. 2 weeks of silence ended with a text from Kayla. The internet's about to be shut off. Need $317 to keep it on. We'll pay back next month. No questions about where I was or why I'd left. No acknowledgement of her role in our family fracture. Just an entitled demand for continued financial support. My trembling finger hovered over the transfer button in my banking app before I remembered my therapist's words about enabling destructive patterns. I replied simply, "I'm not in a position to help financially anymore," then muted notifications from her number. My parents reached out next, a brief cold email from my mother's account, clearly composed jointly. "We hope you've had time to reflect on your behavior and attitude. We're willing to move past this incident when you're ready to apologize to your sister and resume family responsibilities. No recognition of my pain, no accountability for their role, just expectations of continued sacrifice without reciprocity." I archived the message without responding. Thanksgiving arrived, the first major holiday I'd ever spend without family. I declined a colleague's kind invitation to join her gathering, not yet ready to explain my situation to acquaintances. Instead, I enrolled in a one-day cooking class specifically for singles preparing holiday meals. There, I met Sarah, a graphic designer whose family lived overseas. "First solo holiday?" she asked, noticing my hesitation with the recipe portions. When I nodded, she shared her own experience with creating new traditions. "It's scary at first, then liberating, then just your normal," she said, helping me adjust my cranberry sauce. We exchanged numbers. My first friendship initiated without family connections or work relationships. December brought an unexpected opportunity when a competing company approached me about a senior position with greater responsibility and compensation. The interview process served as a welcome distraction from holiday decorations and advertisements depicting perfect family gatherings. When asked why I wanted to leave my current role, I answered honestly about seeking new challenges and growth opportunities. The interviewers nodded approvingly, unaware of the deeper truths behind my career move. Meanwhile, therapy sessions intensified as we specifically addressed family trauma patterns. Terms like emotional manipulation, scapegoating, and parentification provided frameworks for understanding experiences I'd previously normalized. Each session left me emotionally exhausted, but incrementally stronger, like muscles aching after necessary exercise. The weekend before Christmas, I took another step toward reclaiming joy by enrolling in an introductory watercolor class, revisiting an artistic passion I'd abandoned in high school when family commitments consumed my free time. Creating something purely for my own satisfaction felt foreign yet profoundly healing. The holidays passed in a blur of small, intentional activities rather than obligatory family events. Sarah invited me to a misfit Christmas dinner with other friends separated from family by distance, circumstance, or choice. For the first time in years, I attended a holiday gathering without responsibility for others' emotions or experiences. I simply existed as myself, neither caretaker nor scapegoat, just one person among equals. As January arrived with its promises of new beginnings, I accepted the position at the competing company, negotiating a salary that reflected my experience and contributions rather than underselling myself as I'd done previously to appear humble to family. My resignation at TechVision prompted genuine expressions of regret from colleagues who valued my work, a stark contrast to my family's dismissal of my contributions. Rebecca, my former boss, took me to lunch on my final day. "I always knew you. We're capable of more than this environment allowed," she said. "Sometimes growth requires leaving comfortable spaces, even when the leaving isn't your choice." Her words resonated beyond professional contexts, affirming my decision to prioritize my well-being over family expectations. The studio apartment, initially a temporary refuge, gradually transformed into a true home reflecting my emerging identity. I selected furnishings based on my aesthetic preferences rather than practicality for hosting family gatherings. Colors that my mother would have deemed too bold or impractical adorned walls that had never known Kayla's careless wine spills or my father's dismissive glances. Each consciously chosen element represented another small reclamation of self. 6 months passed in a flurry of positive changes that gradually reshaped my life into something unrecognizable from before. My new position as marketing director at Innovate Tech offered challenges that stretched my capabilities while recognizing my expertise. Unlike at TechVision, where family connections had ultimately undermined my professional standing, colleagues here knew me solely through my work and ideas. This clean slate allowed my confidence to rebuild, solidifying with each successful project and acknowledged contribution. The cramped studio apartment, while instrumental in my initial independence, eventually felt constrictive. With my improved financial situation, I secured a one-bedroom in a converted industrial building. Exposed brick walls, large windows, and an open floor plan provided both physical and psychological space for expansion. Each decoration represented a deliberate choice reflecting my emerging aesthetic rather than family expectations. A vibrant abstract painting, something my mother would have dismissed as just splashes of color, became the centerpiece of my living area. Weekly therapy sessions evolved from crisis management to deeper exploration of family dynamics and their impact on my self-perception. My therapist introduced concepts like trauma bonding and intermittent reinforcement that illuminated patterns I'd experienced since childhood. "You were conditioned to value yourself based on your usefulness to others," she explained during a particularly insightful session. "Breaking that pattern isn't selfish. It's necessary for your psychological well-being." These frameworks helped me understand why severing family ties felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying, like removing a heavy burden I'd nonetheless grown accustomed to carrying. My friendship with Sarah deepened through weekly coffee meetups and occasional art classes we attended together. Through her, I met others who valued relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or utility. My social circle expanded cautiously as I learned to trust my judgment about healthy connections. I reconnected with college friends who had gradually disappeared from my life, realizing in retrospect how my family had subtly isolated me through demands on my time and emotional energy. Julie, my freshman roommate, admitted during our reunion lunch that she'd stopped inviting me to gatherings after I canceled last minute for the fifth family emergency that mysteriously centered around Kayla's needs. Romance re-entered my life, unexpectedly when I literally bumped into Michael at an independent bookstore, spilling his coffee on a book I then insisted on replacing. His easy laugh and respectful interest manifested in conversations that focused on ideas rather than transactions of emotional labor. On our third date, when I cautiously mentioned my family estrangement, expecting judgment, he instead shared his own experience establishing boundaries with a manipulative cousin. "Family should be your biggest supporters, not your heaviest burden," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. "You deserve champions, not critics." These simple words of validation brought tears I couldn't explain. Weekend activities that once revolved entirely around family obligations transformed into adventures of self-discovery. Sarah and I took a spontaneous road trip to Michigan, my first vacation without family obligations attached. I tried rock climbing at an indoor gym, sampled cuisine from countries I couldn't have previously named, and attended concerts alone when shows interested me but not necessarily my new friends. Each novel experience strengthened my identity beyond family, roles, and responsibilities. My financial situation stabilized as months passed without family draining my resources. I created a proper savings plan, consulted with a financial advisor about retirement investments, and even splurged occasionally on experiences that brought joy rather than approval. The constant background anxiety about unexpected family financial demands gradually subsided, replaced by growing confidence in my economic self-sufficiency. 3 months into my self-imposed silence, my parents initiated contact through increasingly frequent emails. The initial messages maintained their position, that I owed apologies and resumption of support. "Your sister is struggling without your help," one message noted pointedly. "Family doesn't abandon family during difficult times." When these guilt tactics yielded no response, their approach softened marginally. "We miss Sunday dinners," Mom wrote, without acknowledging that those gatherings had primarily served as platforms for Kayla's dramatics and my diminishment. Dad's contribution added, "The lake house won't be the same this summer without all 4 of us," conveniently forgetting how family vacations had become extensions of home dynamics, with me organizing activities while Kayla received praise for minimal participation. I read each message carefully but maintained my silence, recognizing attempts at reestablishing old patterns without meaningful change. Meanwhile, Kayla launched what Sarah aptly termed a social media revenge campaign, posting cryptic references to toxic family members and "sometimes blood isn't thicker than water." Mutual acquaintances occasionally forwarded these posts, concerned or curious about the family drama unfolding online. I declined to engage in public spectacle, neither defending myself nor participating in character assassination. The inner peace this decision brought far outweighed any temporary satisfaction public vindication might have provided. Professional success accelerated as my energy, formerly diverted to family crises, concentrated on career development. 6 months into my new position, I secured the director-level promotion that had eluded me at TechVision. The achievement felt bittersweet without family celebration, but friends organized a surprise gathering that provided different but equally meaningful validation. Michael attended this celebration, meeting my friends for the first time and fitting seamlessly into the chosen family I was gradually building. His genuine pride in my accomplishment, expressed without qualifiers or comparisons, highlighted how conditional my family's support had always been. As my birthday approached, typically a minor event overshadowed by Kayla's celebrations despite our months-apart birth dates, I decided to reclaim the occasion. A small dinner party with new and reconnected friends replaced the obligatory family gathering, where my preferences were inevitably subordinated to others' comfort. Michael surprised me with tickets to a musical I'd mentioned wanting to see, a thoughtful gift demonstrating attentiveness I'd rarely experienced in relationships. Therapy continued providing crucial guidance through this transformation period. During one particularly significant session, my therapist confirmed what I'd gradually recognized. The scapegoat mechanism in your family was established long before you could have influenced it. Your achievements threatened the narrative that positioned Kayla as the family center, requiring your diminishment to maintain the established order. Nothing you could have done would have changed this dynamic without them choosing to see it. This professional validation of my experience brought both grief for wasted years seeking impossible approval and relief from the burden of responsibility for family dysfunction. After considerable deliberation and therapeutic processing, I composed a final letter to my family, not seeking response or reconciliation, but providing closure for myself. I wrote honestly about my experience within our family system, the pain of conditional love, and my decision to prioritize well-being over martyrdom. "I will always love you as my family," the closing paragraph read, "but I've learned that love without respect and reciprocity becomes poison rather than nourishment. I wish healing for our family, whether or not I remain part of it." I mailed physical copies rather than emails, preventing immediate reactive responses, then blocked their contact information temporarily to provide space for processing without reaction. The most profound breakthrough came during a quiet evening alone in my apartment, jazz playing softly as I prepared dinner for myself. A sudden, overwhelming realization washed over me. I was actually happy in my solitude, comfortable in my skin, without external validation. The compulsive need for family approval had loosened its grip, replaced by authentic self-regard. I deserved love not for what I provided others, but simply for existing. This truth, so basic yet so elusive throughout my life, brought tears that, for once, signified healing rather than hurt. Exactly 1 year after walking out of my parents' house, I awoke to the melodic chime of my alarm, stretching contentedly in morning sunlight filtering through curtains I'd selected based solely on my preference for jewel tones. The date's significance hadn't escaped me, but the anniversary held less emotional charge than I'd anticipated. My routine unfolded normally. Yoga stretches, freshly brewed coffee in my favorite oversized mug, and a quick scan of work emails before fully starting my day. Only when I finally checked my personal phone did I notice something unusual. 14 missed calls, beginning just after midnight and continuing through early morning. 3 from Dad, 5 from Mom, and 6 from Kayla, along with multiple voicemails and text messages marked urgent. My heart raced with familiar anxiety as old patterns threatened to resurface. Past experience suggested another manufactured crisis designed to pull me back into established family dynamics. Yet the sheer volume of attempts seemed excessive even by their standards. With trembling fingers, I played the first voicemail, my father's voice emerging strained and genuinely frightened. "Olivia, it's Dad. Mom's taking me to Northwestern Memorial. Severe chest pain and arm numbness. They think it's a major cardiac event, not like last time. Please call us." Subsequent messages from my mother detailed deteriorating conditions. Emergency surgery required, blockages more extensive than initially thought, uncertain prognosis. Kayla's voicemails transitioned from accusatory, "Answer your phone. How can you ignore this?" to uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I'm scared, Liv. I don't know what to do if something happens to Dad." The final message, left by my mother just 30 minutes earlier, contained 4 words that shattered any remaining emotional distance. "The doctors are waiting." My carefully constructed independence suddenly felt hollow against the prospect of permanent loss and unresolved relationships. I contacted my office to arrange emergency leave, then called my therapist for an urgent consultation. "This isn't about abandoning your boundaries," she assured me during our brief call. "It's about making conscious choices rather than reactive ones. What feels right to you, separate from obligation or guilt?" Michael arrived within minutes of my distressed text, offering both practical assistance and emotional support without attempting to influence my decision. "Whatever you choose, I'm here," he said simply, helping me pack an overnight bag while I researched cardiac procedures on my laptop. With remarkable clarity, I understood that supporting my family through this crisis didn't necessitate surrendering the growth and boundaries I'd established over the past year. I could offer compassion without relinquishing my selfhood. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly as I approached the cardiac unit waiting area. My mother spotted me first, her expression cycling rapidly through disbelief, relief, and uncertainty. Kayla sat hunched in an uncomfortable chair, looking smaller and less formidable than my memory had preserved her. Neither immediately approached as I checked in with the nurses' station, learning that Dad had emerged from surgery but remained in critical condition. When I finally joined them in the waiting area, the silence felt weighted with unspoken history. "Thank you for coming," my mother said formally, as though addressing a kind stranger rather than her daughter. Kayla studied her coffee cup intently, avoiding eye contact. "Of course I came," I replied simply. "He's my father, too." The hours passed in uncomfortable coexistence until the surgeon appeared with cautiously optimistic updates. Triple bypass. Successfully completed, recovery timeline uncertain, next 24 hours critical for assessing long-term prognosis. As medical details occupied our immediate focus, the emotional reckoning temporarily receded to manageable background tension. That evening, when Dad stabilized enough for brief family visits, unspoken hierarchies emerged automatically. My mother assumed I would coordinate insurance details and medical communications, while Kayla received emotional support for her distress. I recognized the pattern, but chose conscious adaptation rather than resentful compliance, stepping briefly into the organizer role while maintaining firm boundaries around my time and emotional labor. When visiting hours ended, I declined my mother's automatic assumption that I would stay overnight, explaining I'd arranged a hotel nearby and would return in the morning. Her surprise confirmed how completely she had expected me to slide back into established patterns despite our year-long estrangement. The real conversation began on the third day, in the hospital cafeteria over untouched sandwiches and cooling coffee. Kayla initiated with unexpected directness. "Why did you just leave like that, without even fighting back?" The question contained hidden accusations but also genuine confusion. For the first time, I didn't soften my response to protect her feelings. Because nothing I could have said would have mattered. You all decided I was the villain in your narrative, long before that night. Her defensiveness flared predictably. You always think you're so perfect, that everyone else is wrong. Then, surprisingly, her voice cracked. Do you have any idea how hard it is being your sister, always in your shadow? You had everything figured out while I was just failing at everything I tried. This unexpected vulnerability created an opening for honesty without cruelty. I never had it figured out, Kayla. I was just holding everything together because someone had to, and it was always expected to be me. Our mother watched this exchange silently before offering her own perspective. We never meant to put so much on you, Olivia. You were always so capable, so independent. Kayla needed more support, more attention. The familiar justification carried less sting than it once would have. Needing support shouldn't have meant diminishing me, I replied calmly. There was room for both of us to be valued differently, without making me the family scapegoat. She flinched at the term but didn't deny its accuracy. Our father's recovery progressed steadily over subsequent weeks, accompanied by tentative family reconstruction. I maintained my separate life while providing practical assistance, researching cardiac rehabilitation programs, arranging home healthcare consultations, and navigating insurance claims with professional efficiency. I attended Sunday family dinners, occasionally, but declined when other commitments or simple self-care needs took precedence. My boundaries remained firm despite occasional testing, particularly from Kayla, whose initial hostility gradually gave way to tentative respect when manipulation attempts failed to produce previous results. My mother struggled most with our newly defined relationship, alternating between recognizing my autonomy and slipping into established patterns of expected sacrifice. During one particularly honest conversation while organizing Dad's medications, she admitted, "I don't always know how to be your mother without depending on you to be the strong one." Her recognition of the pattern, however incomplete, represented progress I'd once thought impossible. Michael met my family under carefully controlled circumstances once Dad had recovered sufficiently for brief social interactions. Their attempts to incorporate him into established dynamics failed against his natural boundary maintenance and genuine admiration for my independence. His presence reinforced my growth, silently demonstrating the healthy relationship I deserved, rather than the conditional acceptance I'd previously settled for. 6 months after Dad's surgery, our family achieved an equilibrium I would have once considered miraculous. Neither complete reconciliation nor total estrangement, but a mindful middle ground where connection coexisted with appropriate separation. I maintained my own apartment, career, and social life while participating in family gatherings on my terms. Financial entanglements remained firmly severed despite occasional hints from my parents about family helping family. Kayla secured stable employment without my intervention and began therapy addressing her own patterns, though our relationship remained more cordial than close. Throughout this evolution, therapy provided crucial perspective on maintaining progress, without backsliding into comfortable but destructive patterns. Healing family relationships doesn't require becoming vulnerable to the same injuries, my therapist reminded me during a session marking my treatment transition from weekly to monthly maintenance. Your compassion can coexist with your boundaries. My relationship with Michael deepened gradually through mutual respect and genuine appreciation, rather than codependence or obligation. When he eventually moved into my apartment, the decision emerged from shared desire rather than financial necessity or external expectations. His consistent support during family interactions provided both practical reinforcement and tangible evidence that healthier relationships were possible. The most profound lesson emerged not from dramatic confrontation, but quiet self-reflection. My worth never depended on family validation or sacrificial caregiving. The approval I'd spent decades chasing could never have satisfied the deeper need for authentic recognition of my complete self, with both strengths and vulnerabilities acknowledged. True healing began not when my family finally saw me clearly, but when I finally saw myself. Today, as I navigate this evolving family landscape, I no longer expect perfect understanding or complete redemption narratives. Some wounds have scarred over rather than disappearing entirely. Some conversations will always require careful navigation. Some patterns may never fully resolve despite everyone's best intentions. Yet peace exists not in perfect resolution, but in accepting imperfect reality while protecting essential selfhood. My journey continues, neither defined by family trauma nor completely separate from family history. I build my future on foundations of self-respect and intentional connections, creating a life where love serves as nourishment rather than obligation. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved for your own well-being? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Remember that prioritizing your mental health isn't selfish, it's necessary. If my story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about healing and growth. Share this with someone who might need permission to set boundaries with family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve love. That doesn't require you to diminish yourself.
My name is Rachel Morgan, and I'm 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, I woke up alone in a hospital room after a near-fatal car crash. My first thought was about my parents, wondering why they weren't there. Then my phone rang. It was my brother Ethan's wife, Ashley, explaining that my parents couldn't visit because they were attending Ethan's business award ceremony in Phoenix. That hurt worse than my broken ribs. But what they're asking for now, it feels like betrayal all over again. Before I tell you how this nightmare unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground against family manipulation. Growing up in suburban Minneapolis, I always felt our family was picture perfect. My parents, Diana and Richard Morgan, were hardworking people who built successful careers in finance. Dad worked as a senior investment advisor at a respected firm while Mom managed the regional branch of a national bank. They weren't wealthy from inherited money, but they created a comfortable upper-middle-class life through decades of smart decisions and careful planning. My brother Ethan is 2 years younger than me. From early childhood, he had this effortless charm that people just gravitated toward. While I was the studious, responsible one who followed rules and worked methodically, Ethan was charismatic and spontaneous. He could talk his way out of trouble with a smile that made everyone forget whatever mistake he'd made minutes earlier. Despite our different personalities, we were close as children. I'd help him with homework while he'd include me in social activities I might otherwise have missed because of my natural shyness. Our parents seemed to treat us equally, at least on the surface. They attended my academic competitions with the same enthusiasm they showed at Ethan's football games. Family dinners were lively affairs where we all shared our daily triumphs and challenges. I excelled academically, eventually earning a scholarship to Northwestern University where I studied economics and accounting. Following my parents' footsteps into finance seemed natural, and they appeared proud when I declared my major. Dad would send me articles about financial trends, and Mom would call weekly to discuss my classes in detail. Meanwhile, Ethan attended University of Minnesota, changing majors 3 times before settling on business management. His grades were average, but his networking skills were exceptional. He joined every club, made connections with professors, and always seemed to land internships through people he met at parties or campus events. The summer after my junior year, I interned at a prestigious accounting firm in Chicago. The work was demanding, requiring 60-hour weeks and meticulous attention to detail. While I was building my resume with substantive experience, Ethan landed a marketing internship through Dad's golf buddy. He spent most of that summer posting on social media and attending networking events that looked more like parties than work. When I mentioned the disparity to Mom during a weekend visit home, she brushed it off with, "Everyone finds success their own way, honey. Ethan's people skills will take him far." It seemed reasonable enough at the time. After graduation, I accepted a position at Henderson Financial Partners in Minneapolis, wanting to be near family while building my career. The starting salary was modest, but the firm had an excellent reputation and clear advancement paths. I rented a small apartment, lived frugally, and began systematically building my savings. Ethan's post-college trajectory was less structured. He worked briefly for Dad's friend's marketing company, then jumped to a startup that failed within 8 months, followed by a series of jobs he always described as stepping stones to something better. Despite his irregular employment history, he maintained an expensive lifestyle, driving a leased luxury car and renting a downtown loft he could barely afford. Our parents never seemed concerned about his financial decisions. When he needed money for rent after splurging on a vacation to Cancun, Mom quietly transferred funds to his account. When he wanted to invest in a friend's dubious business venture, Dad wrote the check while cautioning me about high-risk investments when I mentioned putting some of my savings in a diversified stock portfolio. Still, family gatherings remained pleasant. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and personal milestones together. I was genuinely happy when Ethan met Ashley during a business conference 3 years ago. She was smart, worked in pharmaceutical sales, and seemed to provide some stability in his life. When they married after a whirlwind 6-month romance, our parents spared no expense for the wedding. My relationship with Ethan's new wife started warmly. Ashley and I would meet for coffee when she wanted financial advice or help planning surprise gifts for my brother. She seemed to appreciate my practical nature and organizational skills, often joking that she married the charming Morgan but sometimes needed the sensible one. Around this time, I started dating Marcus, a software engineer I met through a mutual friend. Unlike my previous boyfriends, Marcus immediately clicked with my family. Dad appreciated his analytical mind, Mom loved his polite manners, and Ethan found a willing participant for his fantasy football league. For once, everything in my personal and family life seemed perfectly aligned. When I earned my first major promotion at Henderson Financial, my parents hosted a beautiful dinner celebration. Dad toasted my dedication and intelligence, while Mom got teary-eyed talking about how proud they were. Even Ethan seemed genuinely happy for me, though he quickly turned the conversation to his new position at Vertex Innovations, a fast-growing tech company where he'd recently been hired in business development. 2 weeks later, at Ethan and Ashley's housewarming party for their new suburban home, I noticed my parents had given them an expensive painting as a gift, considerably more lavish than the restaurant gift card they'd given me for my promotion. I pushed away the slight twinge of hurt, telling myself I was being petty. After all, a first home was a bigger milestone than a promotion. The first real crack in our family harmony appeared during Thanksgiving dinner that year. Mom casually mentioned they'd helped Ethan with the down payment on his house. This was surprising news since they'd repeatedly told me their philosophy was that adult children should make their own way financially. When I later asked about the apparent double standard, Dad became uncharacteristically defensive. "Your brother has a family to support now," he said, though Ashley's pharmaceutical sales job actually paid more than Ethan's position. "Besides, you're so good with money, Rachel. You don't need our help like Ethan does." It was the first time I realized that my financial responsibility had somehow become a justification for treating me differently than my brother. Still, I rationalized their behavior, telling myself parents sometimes make imperfect decisions while trying to meet different children's needs. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a pattern that would eventually shatter my perception of our family entirely. The initial cracks in my relationship with my parents widened the following spring when I caught a severe case of pneumonia that landed me in the hospital for 4 days. Marcus visited daily, bringing books and keeping me company despite his busy work schedule. My best friend Jessica brought homemade soup when I returned home and checked on me regularly. My parents, however, called just once and sent flowers instead of visiting, explaining they had tickets to a charity gala that Ethan had invited them to. "We don't want to risk catching anything before the event," Mom explained. "Ethan says there will be important connections there for his career." I told myself not to be childish about it. After all, I was an adult, not a little girl who needed her parents at her bedside. Still, when I saw photos on social media of them dressed up and smiling broadly with Ethan and Ashley at the gala, something inside me ached. 2 months later, I received wonderful news. Henderson Financial had selected me for their Advanced Leadership Program, a prestigious opportunity that only 2 employees received each year. I called my parents immediately, excited to share my accomplishment. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, sounding distracted. "Can I call you back? We're just heading out the door to see Ethan's new office. He got that promotion he was hoping for." When she called back that evening, she spent 20 minutes describing Ethan's corner office view and the impressive title on his new business cards before asking any details about my leadership program. For my 31st birthday, I planned a small dinner at my favorite restaurant with my parents, Ethan, Ashley, Marcus, and a few close friends. 2 days before the event, Mom called to ask if we could reschedule. "Ethan just found out he's receiving the Rising Star Award from the Business Association that night," she explained. "The ceremony conflicts with your dinner. Would you mind moving your celebration? This is such an important recognition for your brother." I swallowed my disappointment and rescheduled, telling myself the actual date didn't matter. But when the rescheduled dinner finally happened a week later, my parents arrived late and left early, explaining they had promised to babysit for friends. "Your brother's award ceremony was exhausting," Mom confided as they were leaving. "But so worth it. The networking opportunities for him were incredible." That summer, Marcus proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Superior. When I called my parents with the news, their response was lukewarm at best. "Oh, that's wonderful," Mom said, without the excitement I'd expected. "Have you set a date yet? You might want to coordinate with Ashley. She just told us she and Ethan are trying for a baby, so you wouldn't want your wedding to conflict with a pregnancy or newborn." I hadn't even accepted the ring yet, and already my engagement was being treated as a scheduling inconvenience around Ethan's family planning. The real turning point came during the annual family 4th of July barbecue at my parents' home. During dinner, Dad proudly announced they were gifting Ethan and Ashley $20,000 to start a college fund for their future child. "We want to be the kind of grandparents who invest in our grandchildren's future," Dad said, raising a toast. Later, when I helped Mom with dishes, I carefully broached the subject. "That was really generous of you and Dad. Will you be doing something similar when Marcus and I have children?" Mom's expression changed instantly. "Rachel, you make good money and Marcus is in tech. You'll be fine. Ethan and Ashley need more help getting established." I couldn't hide my hurt. "Mom, Ethan and Ashley together make more than Marcus and I do. And they live in a house you helped them buy while we're still saving for a down payment." "Don't be selfish, Rachel," she snapped. "Your brother has always needed more support. You've always been independent. It's not about money, it's about recognizing different needs." But it was about money. It was about the consistent pattern of financial and emotional investment my parents made in Ethan's life while expecting me to be satisfied with scraps of their attention and resources. The final blow came when I learned my parents had created a trust fund for Ethan's future children but had made no similar provisions for any children Marcus and I might have. When I discovered this through an accidental comment by their estate attorney at a holiday party, I finally confronted them directly. "We didn't think you'd mind," Dad said defensively. "You're always so rational about money. Ethan is more emotional." "And what about my emotions?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "Do they not matter because I don't throw tantrums when I don't get what I want?" My mother's response haunts me still. "Rachel, you've always been our strong one. Ethan needs us more than you do." In that moment, I realized a painful truth. My competence had become my curse. By being responsible, I had somehow forfeited my right to equal treatment in my parents' eyes. The months following that confrontation were tense. My parents began declining my invitations for dinner, always with plausible excuses that somehow involved Ethan's activities or needs. When we did see each other at family gatherings, conversation was strained, with Mom and Dad lavishing attention on Ethan and Ashley while treating me with polite distance. Meanwhile, Marcus and I began planning our wedding. When I mentioned having the ceremony at my parents' lakeside cabin, a spot that held precious childhood memories for me, Mom hesitated. "We were thinking of letting Ethan and Ashley use it for an extended vacation this summer," she said. "Ashley's been so stressed with work, and they need time away. Maybe you could find a nice hotel venue instead." The message was clear. Ethan's vacation took priority over my wedding. We booked a charming historic Inn instead, stretching our budget considerably. When it came time to discuss the guest list, my parents insisted on inviting numerous friends and associates of Ethan's who I barely knew. These connections could be so valuable for his career, Dad explained. When I pointed out that the additional guests would cost us thousands we hadn't budgeted for, he waved away my concern without offering financial assistance. 2 months before the wedding, Ashley announced she was pregnant. Immediately, all family attention shifted to the news. My bridal shower, which Mom had promised to host, was hastily rescheduled because it conflicted with Ashley's first ultrasound appointment. Everyone wants to be there for that first glimpse of the baby, Mom explained, as if I should understand that seeing a grainy ultrasound image was more important than the celebration she'd promised me months ago. The shower, when it finally happened, felt like an afterthought. Mom spent most of the event talking about becoming a grandmother, while Ashley received congratulations from guests who were supposed to be celebrating my upcoming marriage. 1 week before my wedding day, disaster struck. While driving home from a late work meeting, a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into my car at an intersection. I was rushed to Minneapolis General Hospital with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, a broken wrist, and numerous lacerations. Marcus, who had been at home waiting for me, received the call from emergency services and rushed to the hospital. In the chaos and pain of the emergency room, I kept asking for my parents. Marcus called them repeatedly, leaving increasingly urgent messages. 6 hours after the accident, while I was being prepped for surgery to repair my wrist, Ashley finally called Marcus. What she told him left him speechless. My parents had received his messages, but had decided not to come to the hospital because they were already in Phoenix for Ethan's Entrepreneur of the Year award ceremony. They said they'll try to get a flight back tomorrow after the ceremony, Ashley explained. Diana thinks Rachel will understand that they can't miss Ethan's big moment. It's such an important recognition for his career. When I woke from surgery, groggy and in pain, Marcus couldn't bring himself to tell me the truth. It was only the next day, when my parents still hadn't arrived, that Ashley called me directly. Rachel, I'm so sorry about your accident, she began, her voice smooth and practiced. Your parents wanted me to tell you they're very concerned, but they can't get a flight back until tomorrow. Ethan's award ceremony is tonight, and you know how these networking events are crucial for his position at Vertex. The pain that washed over me had nothing to do with my physical injuries. My brother's award ceremony took precedence over my hospitalization after a near-fatal accident. In that moment, the last illusion I had about my place in my family shattered completely. I understand, I said flatly, and hung up. Marcus witnessed my heartbreak and was furious on my behalf. This is beyond unacceptable, he said, holding my uninjured hand. How could they prioritize a ceremony over their injured daughter? When my parents finally arrived at the hospital the following evening, they brought flowers and apologies that sounded rehearsed. We knew Marcus was with you, Mom said, as if that justified their absence. And the doctors said you were stable. Dad added, Ethan's award was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There were investors there he's been trying to meet for months. I looked at these people who had raised me, who I'd spent my life trying to make proud, and felt nothing but a hollow ache. I could have died, I said quietly. The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by my mother changing the subject to how beautiful the awards ceremony had been and how many important business contacts had approached Ethan afterward. My wedding had to be postponed due to my injuries. When we finally rescheduled for 3 months later, it was a much smaller affair than originally planned. Many guests couldn't make the new date, and honestly, I preferred it that way. The ceremony was intimate and meaningful, focused on Marcus and me rather than impressing my parents' social circle or providing networking opportunities for Ethan. My parents attended, of course, but something fundamental had changed. I no longer looked to them for approval or validation. I no longer felt the need to justify my choices or compete for their attention. The accident and their response to it had severed something deep within me, replacing desperate hope with clear-eyed acceptance of what my family truly was. After the wedding, Marcus and I decided to move to Chicago for his new job opportunity. My firm had an office there and they were willing to transfer me. The distance from Minneapolis felt necessary for my emotional healing. The night before our move, Ethan called unexpectedly. "Rachel, I know things have been weird," he began awkwardly. "But I want you to know I'm sorry about what happened with your accident. I told Mom and Dad they should have come immediately. It was the first genuine moment between us in years." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, surprised by his apparent self-awareness. "Yeah, well." He hesitated. "Family should come first. And speaking of family, I'm having a bit of a situation at work. Nothing serious, just some cash flow issues with one of my projects. I was wondering if you might be able to loan me $15,000 until my next bonus? Mom and Dad would help, but they just put money down on a vacation property." And just like that, the moment of connection evaporated. Even Ethan's rare apology was simply a prelude to asking for money. I declined politely but firmly, citing our moving expenses. What I didn't tell him was that I'd been building my savings specifically to create the financial independence I now recognized was essential to my well-being. Never again would I be in a position where I needed to rely on family members who had repeatedly shown me where I ranked in their priorities. Little did I know then that Ethan's cash flow issues were the first tremors of a much larger catastrophe headed our way. Our first 6 months in Chicago were healing. Marcus thrived at his new tech company, while I quickly earned respect at the regional office of Henderson Financial. We found a cozy apartment in Lincoln Park and began building a social circle that included colleagues and neighbors who became genuine friends. The distance from my family provided perspective. Weekly calls with my parents became monthly, then occasional. They were always busy with Ethan and Ashley's baby preparations, or helping them renovate their home. I stopped expecting them to ask about my life and instead shared my news with people who genuinely cared. In November, Ashley gave birth to a baby boy they named Richard after my father. My parents immediately flew to Minneapolis and stayed for 3 weeks to help the new parents. I sent a generous gift basket and made appropriate congratulatory calls, but declined their suggestion that I use my vacation days to join them. "I'm sorry, but we've already planned a trip to New York that week," I explained, which was true. Marcus had surprised me with Broadway tickets for our first anniversary. Dad sounded disappointed. "This is your nephew, Rachel. Family should come first." The irony of him saying those words to me was apparently lost on him. Christmas came, and we declined the invitation to Minneapolis, choosing instead to host Marcus's parents in Chicago. It was our first holiday away from my family, and the lack of tension made it the most enjoyable Christmas I'd had in years. In February, an unexpected email arrived from a former colleague at my Minneapolis office. The message was cryptic. "You might want to check into what your brother's been doing at Vertex. There are rumors circulating in the financial community." Concerned, I did some research. Vertex Innovations had recently announced a revolutionary new software platform that promised to transform supply chain management. Their stock had soared, and Ethan had been prominently featured in business publications as the development team leader who had secured major clients for the initial rollout. Something about the coverage felt off. Ethan had never demonstrated technical knowledge or project management skills that would qualify him to lead such an initiative. I reached out to industry contacts, making casual inquiries about Vertex's new platform. The responses were concerning. No one had seen a working demonstration of the software. The major clients Ethan claimed to have secured wouldn't confirm their partnerships when contacted by industry analysts. Yet investment money was pouring in based on press releases and Ethan's charismatic media appearances. I debated whether to contact my brother directly with my concerns, but decided against it. Our relationship had deteriorated too much for him to receive such questions as anything but criticism or jealousy. In March, while Marcus and I were enjoying a rare weekend without work commitments, my phone rang with my father's number. It was unusual for him to call rather than text, especially on a Saturday. "Rachel," he began without preamble, his voice tight with stress. "We need your help. There's a situation with Ethan." The situation, as it turned out, was that the Securities and Exchange Commission had launched an investigation into Vertex Innovations for possible securities fraud. The revolutionary software that had attracted millions in investment didn't actually exist in any functional form. The company had been operating essentially as a Ponzi scheme, using new investment to pay earlier investors while creating the illusion of a thriving business. Ethan, as the public face of the fraudulent product, was directly implicated. His emails and presentations had made claims he knew were false. He was facing potential criminal charges. He made some mistakes, Dad said, his voice breaking. But he didn't understand the legal implications. He was just doing what his bosses told him to do. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. My brother had participated in defrauding investors of millions of dollars, and my father was characterizing it as mistakes. What does this have to do with me? I finally asked, though I already suspected the answer. Ethan needs to hire the best defense attorney in Minneapolis, someone who specializes in securities law, Mom interjected, apparently on speakerphone. The retainer is $300,000. I nearly dropped my phone. And you're calling me because? We've put everything we can into it already, Dad explained. We've taken a second mortgage on the house and liquidated most of our investments. But we're still $100,000 short. The implication hung in the air between us. You want me to give you $100,000 for Ethan's legal defense? I clarified, my voice hollow. Not give, Mom quickly corrected.
Loan.
Once this is all cleared up, he'll pay you back. We all will. Marcus, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with increasing concern, took my hand and squeezed it supportively. I don't have that kind of money just sitting around, I said, which wasn't entirely true. Between our wedding savings that we'd never fully used due to downsizing the event, my performance bonuses, and careful investing, Marcus and I had just over $120,000 in our joint savings account. It was our house down payment fund, the future we'd been carefully building together. Rachel, this is your brother we're talking about, Mom's voice sharpened. He could go to prison. What's more important, a future house or your brother's freedom? The question struck me like a physical blow. What about when I was lying in a hospital bed? What had been more important then, their daughter's well-being or their son's award ceremony? I need to discuss this with Marcus, I said finally. This would affect both of us. What's there to discuss? Dad demanded. This is family. You do what you have to do for family. After promising to call them back, I hung up and turned to Marcus, who had heard enough to understand the situation. They're unbelievable, he said, shaking his head. They ignore you when you need them, then expect you to empty your savings when Ethan needs bailing out from his own fraud scheme? We spent the weekend researching securities fraud cases and the likely outcomes. The evidence against Vertex and its executives appeared damning. Even with the best attorney, Ethan was likely facing significant penalties or even jail time if the allegations were true. More disturbing was what we discovered about Ethan's personal finances. Despite his supposedly successful career, he and Ashley had accumulated massive debt. Their mortgage was underwater. They had multiple maxed-out credit cards. They had borrowed against the title of their luxury vehicles. They had even taken loans against the trust fund my parents had established for their son. They've been living completely beyond their means, Marcus said as we reviewed the public records. Even without the legal troubles, they were heading for financial disaster. By Sunday evening, I had made my decision. I called my parents back. I've thought about your request, I began carefully, and I'm sorry, but I can't give you $100,000. The explosion was immediate. Dad called me selfish and heartless. Mom cried and asked what they had done to deserve such an ungrateful daughter. They reminded me of all they had done for me growing up, conveniently forgetting the years of favoritism toward Ethan. If you won't help your brother, then don't consider yourself part of this family anymore, Dad finally said, his voice cold with fury. After they hung up, I sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down my face. Marcus held me as I processed the fact that I had just been disowned for refusing to sacrifice my financial security to rescue my brother from the consequences of his own fraudulent actions. The next morning, I received a text from Ashley. I always knew you were jealous of Ethan's success. Now you're enjoying watching him suffer. I hope you're happy with yourself. I blocked her number without responding. That evening, Ethan himself called. Unlike our parents, he didn't yell or make demands. His voice was subdued, almost humble. I understand why you won't help, he said quietly. I wouldn't help me either if I were you. The admission was so unexpected that I found myself speechless. I really messed up, Rachel, he continued. I got in over my head, started believing my own hype. Now everything's falling apart, and I'm dragging everyone down with me. For the first time in years, I heard genuine remorse in my brother's voice. No manipulation, no charm, just raw honesty. I'm sorry about your accident, he added. I should have made Mom and Dad go to the hospital. I knew it was wrong when they stayed for my stupid award thing. I felt tears welling up again. But these were different. There was sadness, but also a strange sense of relief at finally hearing the truth acknowledged. Thank you for saying that. I managed. I don't expect your forgiveness, Ethan said. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. How they always favored me. How I took advantage of it. How unfair it all was to you. After we hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, processing the conversation. It didn't change my decision about the money, but it shifted something inside me. For the first time, I felt compassion for my brother rather than resentment. He had been shaped by our parents' favoritism as much as I had, just in different ways. That night, I wrote a long email to my parents. I explained calmly why I couldn't provide the money they wanted, but also expressed my hope that someday we might rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. I acknowledged that I loved them despite everything and wished them strength through the difficult times ahead. I never received a reply. The weeks following my parents' ultimatum were surprisingly peaceful. After years of seeking their approval and being disappointed, there was a certain relief in stepping away from the dysfunction entirely. Marcus and I continued building our life in Chicago. I threw myself into work, earning another promotion that came with a significant salary increase. We began seriously house hunting, focusing on neighborhoods with good schools for the family we hoped to start soon. 3 months passed without contact from my parents. Through mutual family friends, I heard that Ethan had been formally charged with securities fraud and wire fraud. Vertex Innovations had collapsed, with its executives facing both criminal charges and civil lawsuits from defrauded investors. In June, an unexpected call came from my cousin Stephanie, my mother's niece who lived in Minneapolis. Rachel, I think you should know that Aunt Diana has been behaving strangely, she began hesitantly. She seems confused sometimes, forgets conversations we've just had, gets angry for no reason. My first thought was that the stress of Ethan's legal troubles was affecting her mental health. But as Stephanie continued describing incidents, a more concerning picture emerged. Uncle Richard seems to be covering for her, Stephanie added. He finishes her sentences, makes excuses when she forgets things, gets defensive when anyone mentions the memory lapses. I thanked Stephanie for the information but wasn't sure what to do with it. My parents had made it clear they didn't want me in their lives unless I was willing to sacrifice my savings for Ethan's defense. 2 weeks later, I received a call from a Minneapolis number I didn't recognize. It was Margaret Wilson, my parents' next-door neighbor for over 20 years. Rachel, I hope you don't mind me calling, she began. Your mother gave me your number years ago for emergency purposes. I'm worried about her. Margaret described finding my mother wandering in her bathrobe, confused about where she was. When Margaret brought her home, my father had been frantic with worry but refused Margaret's suggestion to take Mom to a doctor. He kept saying it was just stress about Ethan's situation, Margaret explained. But Rachel, I've known your mother for decades. This isn't stress. Something medical is happening, and Richard is in denial. This time, I couldn't ignore the warning. Despite everything, these were still my parents. I called my father immediately, but he dismissed my concerns. Your mother is fine, he insisted. We don't need your amateur diagnosis from hundreds of miles away. After that conversation, I knew I needed to see the situation for myself. I took a Friday off work and flew to Minneapolis without warning them. When I arrived at their house, I was shocked by what I found. The normally immaculate home was cluttered and disorganized. Dishes were piled in the sink, mail was stacked unopened on the counter, and there was a general sense of neglect throughout. My mother, always meticulously groomed, was wearing mismatched clothes with uncombed hair. Most alarming was her reaction to seeing me. There was a moment of confusion in her eyes before recognition dawned. "Rachel," she said hesitantly, "what are you doing here? Is it Christmas already?" My father appeared from his study, clearly surprised and uncomfortable with my presence. "Rachel, you should have called first." I pulled him aside while Mom made tea, her movements slow and uncertain. "Dad, something is seriously wrong with Mom," I said firmly. "This isn't about Ethan or our disagreement. She needs medical attention." His face crumpled suddenly, the facade of control disappearing. "I know," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But with everything happening with Ethan, I didn't know how to handle another crisis. I've been trying to manage on my own." That weekend was a turning point. I helped clean the house, sorted through the neglected mail, and most importantly, convinced my father to schedule a comprehensive medical evaluation for my mother. The diagnosis came 2 weeks later: early-onset Alzheimer's disease. The neurologist estimated the symptoms had likely been present for at least a year, possibly longer, but had accelerated in recent months, potentially triggered by the stress of Ethan's legal troubles. I took a temporary leave from work and moved back to Minneapolis to help my father navigate the new reality of my mother's condition. The conflict over Ethan's legal fund seemed insignificant in the face of this much larger family crisis. During this time, I also reconnected with Ethan. His legal situation was proceeding, with a plea deal being negotiated that would likely include some jail time, but substantially less than if he went to trial and lost. "I deserve whatever happens," he told me during a coffee meeting. I knew what we were doing wasn't right, but I convinced myself it was just aggressive marketing, not fraud. The Ethan sitting across from me was dramatically different from the confident, charming brother I'd known all my life. This version was humbled, reflective, and genuinely remorseful. While helping organize my parents' paperwork to ensure bills were being paid and medical information was properly filed, I discovered something disturbing. Their finances were in shambles. They had indeed taken a second mortgage on their home, but they had also drained their retirement accounts, incurring substantial penalties in the process. Most alarming, they had taken high-interest loans from questionable lenders. "Dad, what were you thinking?" I asked, showing him the documentation. He looked away, ashamed. Ethan kept saying he just needed a little more for the legal fund, that his lawyer was close to getting all charges dropped. I believed him. I always believed him. The truth was becoming clear. My brother had continued manipulating our parents even as his fraud case proceeded, extracting money they couldn't afford to give. Whether he intended to repay them or not was irrelevant. The damage was done. With my father's reluctant permission, I contacted a financial advisor friend to help assess the full extent of the damage and develop a recovery plan. The news wasn't good. My parents were on the verge of bankruptcy, with their home at risk of foreclosure. Marcus flew in for a weekend, and we had a serious discussion about our options. Without hesitation, he supported my decision to use a portion of our savings to stabilize my parents' immediate financial situation while longer-term solutions were developed. "This is different than Ethan's legal fund," he said. "This is about your mother's care and your parents' basic security. We can delay our house purchase." I was overwhelmed by his generosity and understanding. This wasn't enabling bad behavior. It was responding to a genuine health crisis with compassion. When I presented the offer to my father, he broke down completely. "After how we treated you," he sobbed, "how we favored Ethan, how we asked you for money for his legal problems but ignored you when you were hurt, how can you possibly want to help us now?" "Because that's what family really does," I answered simply. "Not enabling harmful behavior, but being there in genuine times of need." That evening, as I sat with my mother helping her sort through old photographs she sometimes recognized and sometimes didn't, she had a moment of clarity. "We failed you, Rachel," she said suddenly, her eyes focused and present in a way they often weren't anymore. "We always expected more from you, and gave more to him. It wasn't fair." I held her hand, tears streaming down my face at this unexpected moment of acknowledgement. "I always knew you were the strong one," she continued, "but we shouldn't have taken that for granted." The moment passed quickly, her thoughts drifting again to confused memories, but I held those words close. They didn't erase years of hurt, but they were a balm I hadn't known I needed. While helping stabilize my parents' immediate financial situation, I began a more thorough investigation into exactly how they had ended up in such dire straits. The picture that emerged was more complex and disturbing than I initially realized. Beyond the second mortgage and emptied retirement accounts I'd already discovered, there were multiple high-interest loans taken out over the past year. Most concerning were several documents bearing my mother's signature from periods when, according to her medical records, she was already experiencing significant cognitive decline. My father, overwhelmed by Ethan's legal troubles and my mother's deteriorating condition, had allowed Ethan to handle many financial matters directly. Whether through deliberate manipulation or desperate self-delusion, my brother had continued extracting money from our parents long after it was clear they had nothing left to give. I consulted discreetly with a lawyer friend, Daniela, who specialized in elder financial abuse. She reviewed the documents with growing concern. These signatures are questionable, she noted, and several of these financial decisions were made when your mother's capacity to consent was likely already compromised. There's a strong case for financial exploitation here. I was stunned by the implication. Are you saying Ethan was knowingly exploiting Mom's condition to get money? Daniela's expression was grave. I can't determine intent, but the pattern is troubling. At minimum, there was gross negligence in obtaining financial commitments from someone with diminished capacity. The revelation sickened me. It was one thing for Ethan to make poor decisions in his business dealings, but quite another to potentially exploit our mother's medical condition for financial gain. I decided to confront my brother directly. We met at a quiet cafe, where I laid out what I'd discovered. I didn't know how bad Mom was, he insisted, his face pale. Dad never said anything about dementia or Alzheimer's. He just said she was stressed and forgetful. But you knew something wasn't right, I pressed. You had to notice the confusion, the memory problems. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. I was desperate, Rachel. The legal bills kept mounting, investors were threatening personal lawsuits. Ashley was talking about taking Richard and leaving. I convinced myself Mom was just tired or distracted. I wanted to believe him, but years of witnessing his ability to charm and manipulate made me cautious. These loans have destroyed their retirement security, Ethan. They could lose their home because of what you've done. I know, he whispered. I've ruined everything for everyone. His apparent remorse seemed genuine, but I'd seen this performance before. The difference was that this time, I wasn't willing to let it end with tears and vague promises. Here's what's going to happen, I said firmly. You're going to sign a legal acknowledgement that these debts are yours, not Mom and Dad's. You're going to work with Daniela to legally transfer responsibility to yourself. And you're going to come clean to Dad about everything. To my surprise, Ethan agreed without argument. I'll do whatever you think is right. I'm done running from what I've done. The next phase was even more difficult, helping my father understand the full extent of the financial exploitation that had occurred. Initially defensive and in denial, he gradually came to accept the painful truth as I showed him document after document. I failed your mother, he said, his voice hollow. I was so focused on protecting Ethan that I didn't protect her when she needed me most. With Dad's cooperation, we began the process of legally documenting the financial transactions and creating a record that could potentially help recover some funds. We also established proper guardianship arrangements to protect my mother's interests going forward. During this process, I discovered something unexpected. Before her cognitive decline had become severe, my mother had apparently harbored concerns about Ethan's influence over their finances. I found notes in her personal planner referring to appointments with their family attorney that my father knew nothing about. Curious, I contacted Lawrence Green, who had handled my parents' legal affairs for decades. Initially hesitant to discuss confidential matters, he agreed to meet when I explained the guardianship situation and my concerns about financial exploitation. Your mother came to see me about 8 months ago, Lawrence confirmed during our meeting. She was worried about the amount of money flowing to Ethan and wanted to put some protections in place. What kind of protections? I asked. She created a separate trust with some family assets that couldn't be accessed for Ethan's benefit, he explained. She was quite explicit that these resources were to be preserved for long-term care needs and eventually split equally between you and Ethan, regardless of any family pressures that might arise. I was stunned. Dad never mentioned this trust. Lawrence's expression was sympathetic but unsurprised.
He may not know about it.
Your mother requested confidentiality, even from your father. She said he couldn't be objective where Ethan was concerned. The revelation was bittersweet. Even as her mind was beginning to fail her, my mother had recognized the damaging pattern and taken steps to protect some family resources. She had seen the truth, but hadn't been able to fully address it before her condition deteriorated. Lawrence provided the documentation for the trust, which contained about $200,000 in assets that had been protected from the financial disaster Ethan had created. It wasn't enough to solve all my parents' financial problems, but combined with the support Marcus and I could provide, it offered a path to stability. There's something else, Lawrence added, pulling another folder from his desk. Your mother also recorded a video statement when she established the trust. She asked that it be shared with you if circumstances like these ever arose. He handed me a flash drive. I'd suggest watching this privately. That evening, alone in my childhood bedroom, I plugged the drive into my laptop. My mother's face appeared on screen, recorded many months ago but noticeably more alert and present than she was now. Rachel, if you're watching this, it means things have happened as I feared they might, she began. I want you to know that despite appearances, I've always seen the truth about both my children. Tears streamed down my face as she continued. I've allowed your father's favoritism toward Ethan to go unchallenged for too long. I've participated in it myself, telling myself we were just responding to different needs. But the truth is, we've enabled behavior in Ethan that has harmed him as much as it has hurt you. She detailed how she had watched me build my life independently while Ethan became increasingly dependent and entitled. She acknowledged the pain they had caused me through years of unequal treatment, culminating in the unforgivable decision to attend Ethan's award ceremony instead of coming to the hospital after my accident. I have no excuse for that, she said, her voice breaking. It was the moment I finally recognized how profoundly we had failed you as parents. I began making these arrangements shortly afterward, though I didn't have the courage to address it directly with you or your father. She explained that she had begun noticing changes in her memory and cognitive function, which had prompted her urgency in establishing the trust. I fear I may not be able to make these decisions much longer, she said with remarkable self-awareness. My doctor has mentioned early testing for cognitive decline, and I've noticed myself the moments of confusion, the lost words and thoughts. The final portion of the video was the most difficult to watch. I don't know if I'll still be myself when you see this, she said. I don't know if I'll remember the realizations I've had or the regrets I feel. But I need you to know that I am deeply sorry for the pain we've caused you, for the unequal love we've shown, for the times we've made you feel less valued than your brother. She paused, composing herself. You are extraordinary, Rachel. Your strength, your integrity, your compassion despite how we've treated you, these are rare qualities. I hope someday you can forgive us, but more importantly, I hope you know your own worth, independent of our failure to properly recognize it. The video ended, leaving me sobbing in the quiet of my old room, grieving for the mother who had finally seen the truth but was now losing herself before she could fully make amends. The next morning, I shared the video with my father. He watched in stunned silence, occasionally wiping tears from his eyes. I had no idea, he said when it ended. I never knew she felt this way. I never realized how much we hurt you. It was the beginning of a painful but necessary conversation about the family dynamics that had led us to this point. For the first time, my father fully acknowledged the pattern of favoritism and its devastating consequences for everyone involved. Later that week, with my father's permission, I showed portions of the video to Ethan. His reaction was complex. Shock, shame, and a kind of grief for what our family could have been if these truths had been acknowledged years earlier. I didn't deserve the special treatment, he admitted. And now look where it's gotten all of us. As difficult as these revelations were, they created an opportunity for authentic communication that had been missing from our family for decades. The pretense and denial that had shaped our relationships began to fall away, replaced by painful but honest recognition of the damage that had been done. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. That would take time and consistent change. But it was a beginning, a foundation upon which something healthier might eventually be built. The months that followed brought significant changes for everyone in our family. With Ethan's cooperation, we were able to legally document that many of the loans taken in my parents' names were actually for his benefit, transferring liability where possible. While this didn't eliminate the debt, it created clarity about responsibility and protected my parents from some of the worst consequences of his actions. My mother's condition continued to progress, requiring increasingly specialized care. Using a combination of the protected trust funds and our contribution, we secured a place for her in a memory care facility with an excellent reputation. The financial strain was significant, but manageable with proper planning. My father, stripped of the illusions he had maintained for so long, began therapy to address his enabling behaviors and the damage his favoritism had caused. At 72, he was facing a painful reckoning with the choices that had shaped our family dynamics and led to our current circumstances. Ethan's legal case concluded with a plea deal, 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by probation and restitution requirements. Before reporting to serve his sentence, he met with financial counselors to create a plan for addressing his debts upon release. Ashley filed for divorce shortly after his sentencing, moving with their son to California to live with her parents. As for me, I extended my leave of absence from Henderson Financial to remain in Minneapolis temporarily, helping stabilize my parents' situation. Marcus supported my decision completely, traveling to Minnesota on weekends while maintaining his position in Chicago. 6 months after discovering my mother's hidden trust and video message, we found ourselves gathered in Lawrence Green's office for a difficult but necessary family meeting. My father, Ethan, who had been granted permission to attend before beginning his sentence, and I sat facing Lawrence across his polished conference table. "I've asked you all here to discuss how we move forward from this point," Lawrence began. "There are practical matters regarding Diana's care, the family finances, and how responsibilities will be shared going forward." What followed was unlike any family discussion we'd ever had. For the first time, there was no pretense, no attempt to maintain the fiction that had governed our relationships for decades. Instead, there was uncomfortable but necessary honesty about the past and clear-eyed assessment of our present situation. "I can't undo what I've done," Ethan said at one point, his voice steady. "But I can stop causing more damage. When I get out, I'll work to repay what I owe, especially to you, Rachel." My father, looking older than his years, addressed me directly. "I failed as a parent by playing favorites."
I see that now.
"Your mother saw it before I did, but neither of us corrected it. I can't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know I recognize the harm we caused." I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication at having the truth finally acknowledged, grief for what our family could have been, and a cautious hope that something healthier might still be possible. I needed to hear that, I admitted. For years, I thought there was something wrong with me, some reason I wasn't as lovable or valuable as Ethan. I worked harder, achieved more, tried to be perfect, and none of it ever seemed to matter. "You were perfect," my father said, his voice breaking. "We were the ones who failed." Lawrence guided the conversation toward practical matters: the ongoing financial arrangements for my mother's care, the management of remaining family assets, and the legal framework that would protect everyone's interests going forward. As the meeting concluded, Ethan asked for a moment alone with me. We walked to a small courtyard outside the law office, sitting on a bench beneath a maple tree beginning to show its fall colors. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he said simply. "Not just for the money or the fraud or dragging everyone down with me. I'm sorry for a lifetime of taking more than my share, of accepting favoritism that wasn't fair to you, of never standing up and saying, 'This is wrong.'" I studied my brother's face, searching for the manipulation I'd grown to expect. Instead, I saw genuine remorse and a humility that had never been part of his character before. "I believe you," I said finally, "but trust will take time to rebuild." He nodded. "I know. I have a lot to prove when I get out. To everyone, but especially to you." 2 days later, Ethan reported to begin serving his sentence. My father and I stood in the driveway as his friend drove him away. "What happens now?" Dad asked, suddenly looking lost. "Now we rebuild," I answered. Not the way things were, because that wasn't healthy, but something new that respects everyone's needs and boundaries. In the year that followed, we did exactly that. Marcus and I returned to Chicago, where we purchased a modest home in a neighborhood we loved. I resumed my career at Henderson Financial, eventually earning another promotion. We maintained regular contact with my father, who visited monthly and made consistent efforts to show interest in our lives and respect for our boundaries. My mother's condition continued to deteriorate, though the quality care she received ensured her comfort and dignity. During lucid moments, she sometimes recognized me and expressed joy at my visits. I treasured these moments while accepting that they would become increasingly rare. My father downsized to a small apartment near my mother's care facility, visiting her daily. He volunteered with an Alzheimer's support group, finding purpose in helping other families navigate the challenges he was facing. The experience seemed to soften him, stripping away the rigid expectations and judgments that had characterized his approach to family. Ethan served his sentence, using the time to complete a degree program offered through the facility and participate in financial literacy and ethics training. His letters showed a consistent commitment to taking responsibility for his actions rather than blaming circumstances or others. Upon his release, he secured modest employment and began the long process of addressing his financial obligations, including regular payments toward the debts he had created in our parents' names. True to his word, he prioritized repaying the money Marcus and I had contributed to stabilize the family situation. More importantly, he respected the new boundaries in our family relationships. He accepted that trust would need to be earned over time through consistent actions rather than promises or emotional appeals. Our relationship slowly evolved into something more balanced than it had ever been before. 2 years after the family meeting in Lawrence's office, Marcus and I welcomed our daughter, Sophia, into the world. My father's joy at becoming a grandfather again was tempered by the knowledge that my mother, though physically present, would never truly know her granddaughter. During his first visit after Sophia's birth, Dad and I sat on our back porch while Marcus put the baby down for a nap. "I've been thinking about what I want Sophia to know about our family," I said. "I imagine you'll want to protect her from knowing how badly we failed you," he replied, his expression pained. I shook my head. "Actually, I want her to know the whole story someday. The favoritism, the betrayal, the car accident, everything. But I also want her to know about redemption, about how people can acknowledge their mistakes and work to do better." Dad looked at me, tears in his eyes. "You're a better person than I ever was." "It's not about better or worse," I said gently. "It's about learning and growing. You're not the same father now that you were 3 years ago. Ethan's not the same brother. I'm not the same daughter. We've all changed." And we had. The painful collapse of our family system had ultimately led to something more authentic and balanced. Not perfect, not without lingering hurt and regret, but honest in a way it had never been before. My mother passed away 6 months later, her body finally following her mind into the darkness of her disease. At her funeral, our reconfigured family stood together in grief. My father, Ethan, Marcus, baby Sophia, and me. The public face of family unity was now matched by a private reality of genuine, if imperfect, reconciliation. In the years since, we've continued building this new family dynamic. My father has become an attentive grandfather to Sophia and a respectful, supportive presence in my life. Ethan has maintained his commitment to financial responsibility and personal growth, gradually rebuilding his life and our trust. The wounds of the past haven't disappeared entirely. On difficult days, I still feel echoes of the pain and rejection that shaped so much of my early adulthood. But those feelings no longer define my understanding of myself or my family. What I've learned through this journey is that true family isn't about blind loyalty or enabling harmful behaviors. It's about honest communication, appropriate boundaries, and the courage to acknowledge when patterns aren't healthy. Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is to stand firm in difficult truths rather than perpetuating comfortable lies. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family, know that you aren't obligated to sacrifice your well-being for someone else's poor choices. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for genuine healing. And sometimes, walking away is necessary before any real reconciliation can begin. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about navigating complex family dynamics. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. We heal better when we know we're not alone in these struggles. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by the integrity and compassion you bring to your own life choices.